Hello everyone, welcome to What If Naruto Had Sukuna Sealed Inside Him Part 2. Before we start, please go support Naruto Abyss author for writing that awesome fanfic. Chapter 4 Reelection. Konoha Hospital. Naruto lay unconscious on a bed in the hospital, his small frame looking even frilier beneath the stark white sheets. The steady beep of the heart monitor echoed in the room, a rhythmic reminder that he was alive, though his condition remained uncertain. Hiruzen stood near the bed with arms crossed, his face displayed worry as he watched the medical team work. He had brought Naruto to the hospital himself, carrying the boy while his ANBU operatives arrived ahead of him to secure the area. He knew better than to leave the boy vulnerable not here. The hatred and prejudice Naruto faced every day extended even to the hospital staff. Hiruzen could see it in their cold glances, and hear it in the flat, detached way they spoke about the boy. The nurses and doctors moved around Naruto's bed with the precision their duties required, but their faces betrayed their true feelings. The doctors and nurses did their duty only because Hiruzen was standing there watching. His presence forced them to act professionally. "His vitals are stable," one of the nurses reported flatly, barely sparing a glance at Naruto as she adjusted the foreline in his arm. Her tone was professional but detached. "But his chakra levels are fluctuating erratically. It's strange." "Strange how?" Hiruzen asked, his tone calm but firm. The nurse hesitated, clearly reluctant to explain. Then another nurse, older and less cautious, spoke, her hatred had poorly concealed as she spoke. "It's almost like something's interfering with it, though who knows what with him," she muttered under her breath, her eyes flicking briefly to Naruto. Hiruzen's sharp gaze snapped to her, and she immediately stiffened, her mouth snapping shut. "Speak clearly," he said coldly, "and keep your personal feelings out of this." The nurse nodded quickly, muttering an apology, and stepped back. The head doctor, sensing the tension, stepped forward with a clipboard in his hand. "Hokage-sama," he began, flipping through a clipboard. "The preliminary scans are inconclusive. Physically, the boy has no significant injuries aside from the nosebleed, which stopped before you arrived with him. Internally, however, his chakra network shows severe strain similar to what we might see in someone pushing their limits during a high-level jutsu. There's no permanent damage, but whatever caused this pushed him to his limit." His tone was carefully calm, but the irritation in his voice was obvious. If he had it his way, he wouldn't help Naruto at all. "And yet," Hiruzen said, his voice stern, "Naruto was alone in his apartment. There was no one and nothing to cause such strain. Can you explain?" The doctor adjusted his glasses, avoiding Hiruzen's gaze. "I can't, Hokage-sama. There's no logical explanation. It's unusual, to say the least. But as I stated, there is no permanent damage to his pathways for now." Another nurse glanced nervously at the Hokage before speaking. "The seal on his stomach, it glowed faintly earlier. Whatever triggered it has stopped, but it's still troubling." Hiruzen's expression darkened as he shifted his gaze to the seal on Naruto's exposed stomach. He had inspected it himself at Naruto's apartment when he found him, and again upon arriving at the hospital, this time more thoroughly. And while it remained intact, the fact that it had reacted at all was alarming. The Fourth Hokage's seal was extremely powerful, designed to withstand even the Nine-Tails' immense power. For it to activate without reason. His thoughts churned as he stared at the intricate swirl. Minato placed this seal himself. He poured everything into it, his very life, and it was Kushina who had taught it to him. It shouldn't just react like this without provocation. What could have triggered it? The Nine-Tails is still contained. I would have felt if its chakra were breaking free, everyone would have felt it. And yet nothing. The ripple I felt when the seal glowed, was it a warning? An anomaly? Or something worse? "This has never happened before," Hiruzen said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. His sharp eyes swept over the medical team, lingering on their hesitant movements and averted gazes. He could feel their contempt for the boy lying helpless in the bed. For a moment, Hiruzen contemplated contacting Jiraiya. The Toad Sage had a wealth of knowledge about seals, and his involvement in Naruto's life would be invaluable. But Hiruzen quickly dismissed the idea. Jiraiya was in the middle of an important mission, one that could potentially affect the future of the entire village. Distracting him now was a risk he couldn't afford to take. Still, Hiruzen thought grimly, his gaze fixed on Naruto's pale face. I can't ignore this. Something happened to that seal, and I need to understand why before it happens again. The steady beeping of the heart monitor was a stark contrast to the turmoil in Hiruzen's mind. He turned to the head doctor, his voice sharp with authority. Has the chakra network stabilized? The doctor hesitated, glancing at the monitor before replying. For now, yes. But the fluctuations earlier were unlike anything we've recorded before. If it happens again, he trailed off, his tone suggesting he wouldn't mourn the boy if it did. Hiruzen's eyes narrowed. It won't happen again, he said firmly, though the unease in his chest betrayed his confidence. Outside, the ANBU operatives stood stationed by the door, their presence a silent reminder of Hiruzen's authority. He had sent them ahead for this very reason. Naruto needed protection, even here. Especially here. Hiruzen turned back to the head doctor, his sharp gaze pinning the man in place. Keep monitoring him closely, he instructed, his tone cold and commanding. Any changes, no matter how minor, are to be reported to me immediately. If he so much as sneezes, I want to know. And do not let personal feelings interfere with your duty, or there will be consequences. The room seemed to grow colder as the Hokage's words settled. The head doctor swallowed hard, a bead of sweat forming at his temple despite the neutral expression he tried to maintain. He bowed slightly, his voice tight as he replied, Yes, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen's piercing gaze sweeping over the rest of the medical staff. That goes for all of you, he said. A wave of unease rippled through the room. The nurses and doctors exchanged nervous glances, their earlier contempt replaced by a growing sense of dread. The air itself seemed heavier, charged with an invisible pressure that prickled at the edges of their consciousness. One of the younger nurses, standing by the monitor, felt her knees weaken slightly. Though the Hokage's tone remained calm, there was an unspoken force behind his words, a silent reminder of who he was. This wasn't just the kind old man they whispered about behind closed doors. This was the third Hokage, the professor, a man who had lived through wars and commanded respect not just through his title, but through his actions. The killing intent emanating from Hiruzen was subtle yet undeniable, like a blade pressed lightly against their throats. The head doctor clenched the clipboard in his hands, his palms damp with sweat. Yes, Hokage-sama, the head doctor repeated, bowing a little lower this time. Satisfied, Hiruzen turned back to Naruto, the intensity in his gaze softening just slightly as he looked at the boy. But the weight in the room remained, lingering like a shadow long after the Hokage's focus had shifted. The medical staff busied themselves in silence, their movements quick and precise. None of them dared to meet Hiruzen's eyes again, their earlier disdain buried beneath the oppressive reality of his authority. Hiruzen knelt beside the boy once more, brushing the edge of the blanket back to expose the seal. He placed a hand over it, feeling the faint ripple of chakra beneath his palm. The glowing had been stopped, but it left behind more questions than answers. His gaze lingered on Naruto as his mind raced through possibilities. If the seal is intact, then this must be external. But who or what could have caused such a disturbance? There hasn't been any sign of tampering, not from within or without. And Naruto himself, he frowned. Even if his chakra network is strained, he doesn't have the capacity to disrupt the seal on his own. Whatever caused this disturbance, I must find the source. Otherwise, I fear we could all perish, and this could very well lead to another war. Hiruzen let out a deep sigh as his hand lingering on Naruto's small frame for a moment before he stood and turned to leave the room. The moment the Hokage exited, the two ANBU operatives entered the room. Their masks revealed nothing, but their presence spoke volumes. They were more than just guards, they were there as enforcers, a reminder to the doctors and nurses of what would happen if they dared to let their personal prejudices interfere with their duties. Hiruzen wasn't naive. He knew that leaving Naruto in the care of these individuals was a risk. Their glares and muttered remarks had made their feelings all too clear. Despite the fear his killing intent had instilled in them, it could only suppress their hatred, it wouldn't erase it. But that was precisely why the ANBU were there. Should anyone be foolish enough to act on their prejudice and harm the boy, they'd be met with a swift and brutal end. One of the ANBU moved to the corner of the room, standing silently like a shadow, their masked gaze fixed on the staff. The other remained stationed by the door, their presence suffocating in its quiet intensity. The medical staff exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier contempt simmered just beneath the surface, but the fear of retribution kept their hands steady and their mouths shut. Whatever thoughts they harbored, they knew better than to act on them now. Inside the seal, Naruto was unconscious as he lay there, his body limp and his breathing steady. He was completely unaware of the two beings watching him, and that they were responsible for the excruciating pain he had felt and the state he was in. "So, this is the boy, huh?" Sukuna said, as he observed Naruto's body for the first time. He crouched and examined Naruto from head to toe, noting the boy's small, frail frame. The child looked to be about 8 years old, perhaps a couple of years older. He had red hair with golden blonde tips, and 3 whisker marks on each cheek that stood out subtly against his pale skin. Sukuna's gaze then shifted to the boy's closed eyes. His curiosity got the better of him, and he reached out. Using 2 fingers, he carefully lifted one of Naruto's eyelids. The boy's celestial blue iris caught the faint light of the mindscape, its brilliance momentarily holding Sukuna's attention, the only person he'd seen with eyes as blue as these. His mind drifted to Satoru Gojo. "Tch," Sukuna muttered, releasing Naruto's eyelid. Gojo's eyes were sharper. A limitless void reflected in those accursed 6 eyes of his. But this, he paused, his gaze lingering on Naruto. This is different. No calculation, no control, just raw potential untapped. A canvas waiting for someone to paint it, though I wonder if this brat will ever hold a brush. Gojo's eyes had been a reflection of his mastery, of his unrivaled understanding of cursed energy and cursed techniques. But this boy's eyes, they felt unrefined. The potential was there, buried beneath weakness and inexperience. Yet the thought intrigued him, what would these eyes become under the right circumstances? Feeling intrigued, Sukuna decided to delve deeper. He placed a hand on Naruto's chest in the center, his fingers pressing lightly against the boy's small chest, and he began to examine Naruto's soul. Almost immediately, Sukuna's eyes widened in surprise. There it was again, that strange energy. It was similar to the malevolent force that radiated from the fox in the cage, but at the same time it was different, it lacked that malevolent feeling. And this strange energy that both the fox and this posse's felt similar to cursed energy, but it wasn't the same. This energy felt more alive, vibrant even. It lacked the decay and bitterness that typically accompanied cursed energy. Instead, it pulsed with a vitality that was both fascinating and unsettling, as though it were tied intrinsically to life itself. And what he found surprising was that this boy, he seemed to have a large amount of it. Sukuna's hand lingered on Naruto's chest as he assessed the scale of the energy. The sheer volume was staggering, easily equal to 6 of his previous 20 cursed fingers. How could a child possess this much power? Impressive. For someone so small, you're carrying quite the burden, aren't you, brat? He said as he removed his hand from Naruto's chest, but his gaze remained fixed on his unconscious form. This energy wasn't just abundant, it was volatile, raw and untamed, swirling through the boy's body like a storm. The gears in Sukuna's mind turned as he considered the implications. What kind of child could handle such immense power without being torn apart? Who were his parents that had given birth to him? Perhaps the answer lies there. It's no wonder the fox is in a cage. This energy, if left unchecked, it would devour the boy from the inside out. But who sealed the fox in him and why? Sukuna thought, then he turned and looked at the 9 tails. I don't suppose you'd be willing to answer my question, right, fox? I've already given you more than enough answers, human. I am not obliged to give you more. Now leave me alone. I have no further interest in you or that brat. You're both powerless against me, especially you. The 9 tails said, then it retreated deeper into the cage. To it, Sukuna was nothing more than a parasite that he couldn't quite figure out, and happened to be sealed into the boy. Whatever Sukuna did, as long as he didn't interfere with the 9 tails' plans, then it didn't care. Sukuna watched the beast retreat further into the recess of its cage before turning back to Naruto, who was still unconscious. I expected as much. Well, it looks like I'll have to go through the boy's memories, but first. Sukuna stood and walked forward for a little bit before stopping, The fox said that it and I are sealed in the boy, and that this is a reflection of his mind. If so, then. He raised his right leg and stomped on the ground, causing a large cascading effect as ripples moved out and the mindscape shook a bit. He waited for a few moments, then it happened. The water that once looked yellow was dyed red, and then made sure Naruto wasn't hurt. Sukuna walked up to the throne and sat down on it. He made this part of the seal similar to the inner world he had when he was inside of Yuji Itadori. Ah, that's a lot better. Now to see what's in this boy's mind and what I can learn from it, Sukuna said as he leaned forward on his knuckles and watched Naruto's life unfold. The first thing he saw was Naruto sitting somewhere, and there were other children around. At this time Naruto looked to be about 3 years old. Then a woman walked up giving them food and Naruto watched, but when she got him her face twisted in disgust. She seemed like she was debating even feeding him. Naruto's stomach growled as he waited and then she gave him some scraps, the last of the food, but that was it. After that she walked away, not saying a word or being kind to him like she was to all the other children. On other days different staff members worked at what Sukuna figured was an orphanage, and they were just as bad if not worse. Naruto was often starved, going hungry at night, and depending on the season freezing or hot as well. He wasn't allowed to sleep with the other children. He was given a worn-out cot that smelled like someone puked and wet themselves, and the blanket he was given, counting they didn't take it away, was old and worn, threadbare, barely holding together. And his clothes were the same but slightly better. The orphanage staff didn't bother locking the door of the room he was in. They knew he wouldn't dare try to leave. The room was cold and dark. The only sound was the occasional scurry of rats and mice along the walls. Another instance was he had to wait till all the children were done bathing and he barely had any soap. All the hot water was used up and the water was dirty. Yet they made him get in anyways. Despite his age, even he could tell this water wasn't good for him, but he didn't have a choice. If he didn't, he'd be punished, and he knew very well what that entailed. He was also abused by some of the staff members. He'd be pushed around, shoved or beat under the guise of punishing him. They didn't want the demon to fight back, so what better way to make him feel like he deserved it? It got worse as Naruto's life spiraled deeper into a living nightmare. Each day at the orphanage blurred into a relentless cycle of neglect and cruelty that would have broken anyone else, let alone a 3-year-old. The staff made it a point to remind him, in subtle and overt ways, that he was nothing less than nothing. A monster, a burden, a mistake that should have never been born. When mealtime came, he wasn't allowed to eat with the others at the table. Instead, he was forced to sit on the cold, dirty floor in the corner of the dining hall, away from their laughter and warmth. The staff would toss him whatever remained, often bruised fruit, stale bread, or gristle that even stray dogs would reject. If he dared complain, he wouldn't eat at all. One particularly cruel staff member once spat in his bowl of watery porridge before handing it to him, sneering as she muttered, "Eat up, demon. It's more than you deserve." Winter was the worst. The orphanage barely heated the building, and Naruto's corner room might as well have been outside. The windows were cracked, letting in freezing drafts that bit into his skin. His thin blanket provided no comfort, and his threadbare clothes did little to shield him from the cold. Nights were a torment of shivering and huddling in the fetal position, desperately trying to conserve what little warmth his small body could generate. But the worst part, the most soul-crushing agony, wasn't the physical abuse or the starvation, it was the isolation. Naruto didn't understand why everyone hated him. He didn't know why the staff sneered at him, why the other children avoided him like a plague. He didn't know why the villagers outside the orphanage glared at him with such venom when he accompanied the staff on errands. All he wanted was what he saw other children receiving so easily, a kind word, a warm touch, a smile meant for him. Instead, he got cold stares and cruel laughter. He once tried to make a friend. A new boy, about his age, had arrived at the orphanage. Naruto thought maybe, just maybe, this boy wouldn't hate him. He offered the boy one of his few possessions, a small wooden carving he had found in the trash and cleaned up. The boy hesitated, his eyes wide with curiosity, but before he could accept, one of the staff members swooped in, snatching the carving from Naruto's hands. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, glaring at him. "You don't get to bribe people into liking you, demon." She smashed the carving against the wall, splintering it into pieces, and dragged Naruto away by his ear as he sobbed. The boy never spoke to Naruto again. Sukuna watched as this all unfolded. He too had the same question. Why do they hate this boy? To treat him like this, and he's just a child, and they keep calling him a demon. Is it something his parents did? Or perhaps do they know the fox and fear his power? But if that's the case, why nor just outright kill him? Sukuna speculated a bit more, but seeing he was getting nowhere, he continued going through Naruto memories. The next thing he saw was that when Naruto turned 4, the matron had shoved Naruto out, not even bothering to give him a coat or shoes to protect him from the biting chill of the autumn air. He stumbled down the orphanage steps, his small frame swaying as he tried to balance on his frail legs. Her words, "You're nothing but a curse, a demon that should never have been born," echoed in the air behind him as the heavy door slammed shut. Naruto stood there for a moment, his breath visible in the frosty air. His tiny hands clenched at the frayed ends of his shirt as he looked around, his blue eyes wide with confusion and fear. He didn't understand why he had been thrown out. What had he done this time? The orphanage had been cold and cruel, but at least it was somewhere to sleep, somewhere to be. Now, even that had been taken from him. Sukuna observed as Naruto began wandering aimlessly, his steps hesitant and uneven. The streets of Konoha were eerily quiet that night, but the few villagers who passed him didn't spare him a glance, or if they did, it was only to sneer or mutter curses under their breath. A shopkeeper carrying a sack of goods deliberately swerved into Naruto's path, knocking him over without so much as an apology. The boy hit the ground with a soft cry, his hands scraping against the rough stone road. Naruto didn't cry. He sat there for a moment, staring at his scrapped palms, before slowly pushing himself back to his feet. His knees wobbled, but he managed to stand. The boy kept moving, his small, bare feet slapping against the cold, damp ground. The wind picked up, tugging at his tattered shirt and chilling him to the bone. He wrapped his arms around himself, his breath coming out in trembling puffs. His stomach growled loudly, but there was nothing he could do about it. He hadn't eaten that day again. Sukuna scoffed. "Pathetic," he muttered, though his voice lacked its usual venom. There was no satisfaction in watching this boy's misery. If anything, it left an odd, bitter taste in his mouth. A child like this stripped of everything, even the most basic human kindness. Sukuna had seen cruelty in his own time, but this? This was an entire community united in their hatred for one child. It was disgusting. Naruto continued wandering until his legs gave out, collapsing in an alleyway between two closed shops. He curled up into a ball, pressing his back against the cold wall and tucking his knees under his chin. His body shook violently as the cold seeped into his bones. The only sounds were the distant murmurs of the villagers and the occasional barking of stray dogs. Hours passed. Sukuna could feel the boy's body growing weaker, his breathing shallow. A lesser child would have succumbed to the cold by now, but Naruto's small frame clung stubbornly to life. His fingers twitched, his blue eyes half-lidded as he fought to stay conscious. The alley was dark and narrow, the kind of place people avoided, the kind of place no one would think to check. Naruto's small figure was almost invisible, hidden in the shadows as the night dragged on. Sukuna observed the boy's struggle, the defiant spark in him refusing to extinguish even as his young body was reaching its limits. He couldn't help but be impressed by the boy's resilience. Despite all that was happening, he still clung to life and didn't get sick while having no protection from the elements. This lasted for days. Then one night, as Naruto lay in an alley asleep, an ANBU with a dog mask found him shivering in the streets. The next day, the Hokage had taken him in, giving him a small apartment and enough money to survive. The old man had been kind, and Naruto appreciated it, but it couldn't fill the void in Naruto's heart. The next memory unfolded as Sukuna watched Naruto's life shift after the Hokage intervened, but the improvement was only superficial, a plaster over a gaping wound. Sukuna observed as the old man, Hiruzen Sarutobi, handed Naruto a key to a modest apartment. It was more space than Naruto had ever had, but it was cold, empty, and bare. No decorations, no personal touches, just a single bed, a small kitchen, and a window that rattled in the wind. Hiruzen had tried to smile, tried to reassure the boy that this was his new home, but even Sukuna could see the weight of the old man's guilt. He knew this wasn't enough, and yet, it was all he could give. Naruto's first night in the apartment was painfully quiet. Sukuna watched as the boy wandered the small space, his bare feet padding softly against the wooden floor. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the cracked walls, his blue eyes wide with uncertainty. The silence was oppressive, the kind that pressed down on his small frame like a physical weight. He curled up under the thin blanket, his body trembling not from the cold this time, but from the unfamiliarity of it all. For the first time in his young life, he was truly alone. The next day, Naruto ventured out into the village. Sukuna followed the boy's memories as he wandered through the bustling streets, his small figure weaving between villagers who barely noticed him, or if they did, they glared with open hostility. The whispers followed him wherever he went. "Why is he still here? That brat should have died with the fox. Don't let him near the kids." Naruto pretended not to hear, but Sukuna could see the way his shoulders hunched, the way his pace quickened as he tried to escape their venomous stares. The boy found a small market stall selling cheap bowls of noodles and handed over a few crumpled bills from the allowance Hiruzen had given him. The shopkeeper's face twisted with disgust as he accepted the money, slamming the bowl down on the counter with unnecessary force. Naruto flinched but said nothing, taking his food and retreating to a corner where he could eat in peace, or at least, where he could pretend to. As Sukuna continued to observe, he noticed a pattern. The villagers' hatred was relentless, unyielding, and completely unfounded. Naruto wasn't even old enough to have done anything to earn their ire. He was just a child with no family, no support, no understanding of why the world seemed to despise him. Sukuna couldn't comprehend it. In his own time, strength dictated worth, and the weak were cast aside. But this boy wasn't weak. He had survived more in his few years than most adults could endure, and still, he stood. Naruto's resilience became even more apparent as he grew older. Sukuna watched as the boy learned to fend for himself, scrounging for food when his meager allowance ran out, and repairing his own clothes when they tore. He made do with what little he had, finding creative solutions to problems that no child should have to face. Yet, despite his resourcefulness, the loneliness never left him. It clung to him like a shadow, a constant reminder of the isolation that had been forced upon him. One day, Naruto tried to join a group of children playing in the streets. Sukuna observed as the boy approached cautiously, his steps hesitant but hopeful. He offered them a small, awkward smile, his blue eyes bright with anticipation. But the other children stopped playing the moment they noticed him. One of them sneered, pointing at Naruto with a cruel laugh. "Why would we play with a monster like you?" Naruto's smile faltered, but he didn't give up. "I'm not a monster," he said softly, his voice barely audible over their laughter. "I just want to play." The oldest of the group stepped forward, a smug grin on his face. "Get lost," he said, shoving Naruto backward. The boy stumbled but didn't fall. His fists clenched at his sides as he stood his ground, his determination shining through despite the tears welling in his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere," Naruto said, his voice stronger this time. The other children laughed, and the oldest boy shoved him again, harder this time. Naruto hit the ground with a thud, but he didn't cry. He pushed himself back up, his small frame trembling with anger and frustration. "Leave me alone!" he shouted, his voice cracking. The group of children scattered, laughing as they ran off, leaving Naruto alone in the street. He stood there for a moment, his fists clenched, his head bowed. Then, slowly, he turned and walked away, his steps heavy with defeat. Sukuna couldn't look away. The boy's pain was raw and unfiltered, his emotions laid bare for anyone to see. And yet no one did. No one cared. The world seemed determined to break him, but Naruto refused to shatter. There was something about that defiance, that stubborn refusal to give up, that struck a chord with Sukuna. He continued watching as Naruto's life progressed into the next chapter of his hardships, the Konoha Ninja Academy. The memories shifted, showing Naruto entering the academy for the first time. He was smaller than the other children, his bright red and golden-tipped hair messy and his clothes slightly oversized. Despite the harsh treatment he had endured up to this point, there was an undeniable spark in his blue eyes, a bit of hope and excitement at the prospect of becoming a shinobi. But the academy was no haven for Naruto, it was yet another battlefield. From the very beginning, the instructors made it clear that they wanted nothing to do with him. They ignored his questions, overlooked his raised hand during lessons, and barely offered him the bare minimum of instruction. When Naruto struggled with a particular technique, they offered no guidance, no advice to help him improve. If anything, they seemed to take pleasure in watching him fail. "Pay attention, Uzumaki!" One instructor barked during a kunai throwing exercise, his tone harsh and unforgiving. "Maybe if you stopped fooling around, you'd actually hit the target for once." Naruto flinched at the reprimand but didn't argue. He bit his lip, forcing himself to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. He knew by now that crying wouldn't get him anywhere. It never had. Instead, he gritted his teeth and picked up another kunai, his small hands trembling slightly as he aimed. The kunai missed the target by a wide margin, and the instructor snorted in disdain. "Hopeless," the man muttered under his breath, loud enough for Naruto to hear. The other students weren't much better. They whispered and snickered behind his back, their laughter cutting through the air like knives. "Did you see that? He couldn't even hit the target. No wonder everyone calls him a failure." Naruto pretended not to hear, his face carefully blank as he retrieved his kunai and tried again. He threw with all his strength, his movements fueled by frustration and determination, but the result was the same. The blade landed nowhere near the target. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his nails digging into his palms as he fought to keep his emotions in check. Despite the constant ridicule and neglect, Naruto refused to give up. After each lesson, he stayed behind, practicing long after the other students had left. He threw kunai until his arms ached, ran laps around the training grounds until his legs felt like they would give out, and practiced the basic hand seals over and over again until his fingers felt numb. Sukuna observed as the boy pushed himself to his limits, day after day, with no one to guide him or offer encouragement. Naruto's determination was remarkable, but it was also painfully lonely. He trained in solitude, the empty training grounds his only companion. The other students had families, friends, mentors, people who supported them and celebrated their progress. Naruto had none of that. His victories, however small, went unnoticed, and his failures were met with scorn. One particularly harsh memory stood out. It was a written exam day, and Naruto had struggled to answer the questions on the test. He wasn't stupid, far from it, but the lack of guidance and the cruel remarks from the instructors had worn down his confidence. When the results were announced, Naruto's name was at the very bottom of the list. The instructor didn't bother to hide his disdain as he handed Naruto his paper. "Fail again, Uzumaki," the man sneered. "You'll never make it as a ninja at this rate." Naruto stared at the paper in his hands, his vision blurring as tears welled up in his eyes. He clenched the sheet tightly, his knuckles white, and forced himself to swallow the lump in his throat. He wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of them. He shoved the paper into his bag and left the classroom without a word, his steps quick and purposeful as he made his way to the training grounds. That night, Sukuna watched as Naruto stood alone in the moonlit clearing, his breath visible in the chilly air. The boy practiced the clone jutsu over and over again, despite his exhaustion. Each attempt left him more drained than the last, but he didn't stop. He refused to stop. "I'll show them," Naruto muttered, his voice low and trembling. "I'll prove them wrong. I'll get stronger, no matter what." The jutsu fizzled out once more, and Naruto fell to his knees, his body trembling with fatigue. He pounded the ground with his fists, frustration etched across his face. But even then, he didn't cry. He sat there for a long moment, his chest heaving as he caught his breath, before slowly pushing himself back to his feet. Sukuna couldn't help but be impressed. Despite the overwhelming odds stacked against him, the boy kept going. He failed, and he failed again, but he never stopped trying. That stubborn resilience was a trait Sukuna recognized well. It was the same unyielding spirit that had driven him to become the king of curses in his own time. The memories continued to unfold, revealing the years of relentless effort that defined Naruto's time at the academy. He studied late into the night, using worn-out textbooks that Hiruzen had given him. He practiced jutsu in the woods, using trees as makeshift targets. He trained his body, running laps around the village and doing push-ups until his arms gave out. But no matter how hard he worked, it was never enough. The academy instructors continued to dismiss him, their disdain for him as blatant as ever. And when Naruto failed the graduation exam for the second time, Sukuna felt an unfamiliar twinge of anger. Not at Naruto, but at the village that had set him up to fail. "This village, they've done everything they can to break you," he muttered, his voice low and contemplative. "And yet here you are, still standing. Still fighting. You're either a fool or the strongest brat I've ever seen." Sukuna then turned his attention inward, focusing on the strange energy within the boy Chakra, they called it. He had observed the villagers and academy instructors use it during demonstrations. Chakra was a fusion of mental and physical energy, a concept foreign to Sukuna, yet fascinating in its potential. Unlike cursed energy, which was born of negative emotions, hatred, fear, and sorrow, Chakra felt more balanced, almost alive. It lacked the decay and bitterness of cursed energy, but it was no less potent. Naruto, despite his lack of formal instruction, was brimming with the stuff. He watched the way the boy trained relentlessly, his chakra flaring with each failed attempt to perform what they called a jutsu. The hand signs, or hand seals as they were called, were used to mold chakra into specific techniques, the same way cursed techniques shaped cursed energy. The similarities were undeniable, and Sukuna found himself intrigued by the system's complexity. "Jutsu, jujutsu," Sukuna mused, a dry chuckle escaping his lips. "The names are too close to be a coincidence. What kind of world have I ended up in?" The memories revealed more than just the mechanics of chakra. They also painted a grim picture of Naruto's suffering. Sukuna had pieced together the story of the nine-tailed fox, the Kyuubi, as the villagers called it. The Fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, had sealed the beast within Naruto on the night of its rampage. The villagers hailed Minato as a hero for his sacrifice, but they despised the boy who bore the burden of the fox's imprisonment. "Hypocrites," he muttered. "They praise the man who caged the beast but condemn the child who keeps it locked away and keeps your dumb asses alive." What the fox hadn't mentioned, but Sukuna had deduced, was that only half of it was sealed within Naruto. The rest was gone, likely consumed in some ritual or scattered into the ether. Sukuna's experience and knowledge of the soul and energy was unparalleled. It allowed him to sense it immediately. The fractured nature of the Nine-Tails spirit was unmistakable, a glaring imperfection in an otherwise overwhelming presence. The beast might have been hatred incarnate, but even it wasn't whole. And the boy didn't even know. He didn't understand the power within him, the potential to reshape the world or destroy it. Naruto could have lashed out, could have unleashed the fox's rage upon the village that tormented him. Yet he didn't. Sukuna watched as the boy endured insult after insult, his head held high despite the tears that threatened to spill. "What a fool," Sukuna said, though he wasn't mocking the boy. "To seek their acceptance when you could crush them underfoot. To long for love when all they've given you is nothing but hate." He continued to observe as Naruto pulled pranks, his mischievous grin hiding the loneliness that ate away at him. The boy painted the Hokage monument, dyed the village fountains bright orange, and swapped signs on the market stalls, all for an inch of attention. Sukuna saw through it immediately. The pranks weren't about causing chaos, they were about being noticed, being acknowledged. He wanted someone to acknowledge his existence. Bad publicity was better than no publicity at all. The memories shifted again, showing Naruto sitting alone in his apartment after another failed exam. The boy stared at the cracked walls, his knees pulled to his chest as he hugged them tightly. He wasn't crying, not anymore. Sukuna could see the determination in his eyes, the fire that refused to be extinguished. "They'll notice me," Naruto whispered to himself, his voice trembling but resolute. "One day, they'll see I'm not a monster. I'll prove them wrong. I'll become Hokage, and then they'll have to respect me." Sukuna tilted his head, his expression unreadable as he watched the boy. There was a strange sense of familiarity in those words, a reflection of his own rise to power. He, too, had been scorned and feared in his time. He, too, had sought acknowledgement not through love, but through domination. And yet, this boy chose a different path. "You're an idiot," Sukuna said, his voice tinged with amusement. "But maybe that's what makes you strong. You don't let their hatred consume you. You fight it, even if it breaks you." The King of Curses fell silent, his gaze lingering on the boy who had somehow endured a lifetime of suffering in just a few short years. As Sukuna sat there, reviewing everything he had learned from the boy's memories and about this strange new world, he couldn't help but feel something unexpected stirring within him. It was faint at first, like a whisper in the dark, but it grew louder the more he dwelled on the boy's life. He leaned forward slightly, crossing his forearms in thought, his crimson eyes narrowing as he tried to identify the unfamiliar sensation. It wasn't admiration, though there was something about Naruto's resilience that commanded a degree of respect. Nor was it disdain, though Sukuna often found himself scoffing at the boy's naive optimism. No, this was different, something he hadn't felt in centuries. Pity. The realization struck him like a blow, and for a moment, Sukuna sat frozen, his expression unreadable. Pity was not an emotion he was accustomed to. It was foreign, unwelcome, and yet undeniable. He hadn't felt anything like this since Euron. Sukuna could still see it clearly, the boy sitting amidst the frozen corpses of his family and neighbors. The bodies were twisted in grotesque poses of agony, their faces contorted in fear. Yet the boy sat there, untouched by the frost, his small frame huddled in the center of the carnage. He wasn't crying. His eyes were dry and hollow, as if the horrors around him had drained him of all emotion. Sukuna had stumbled upon the scene, and questioned Euron, but even he didn't understand what happened. And so the King of Curses had taken this strange boy with him, and things went from there. Sukuna had felt it then, this same gnawing sensation in his chest, this pity for someone so wretchedly alone and abandoned. He of all people, back then, had shown compassion. Now, as he looked at Naruto, that same feeling had returned. Sukuna frowned, his forearms tightening across his chest as he leaned on one, his sharp mind grappling with the why. Why did this boy, this insignificant brat, evoke such a reaction? He thought of Naruto's memories. They played in his mind in a loop. The boy's suffering was undeniable, but so was his resilience. Sukuna had always despised weakness, yet he couldn't bring himself to hate the boy. And it wasn't just the boy's suffering that stood out, no, it was something deeper. The more Sukuna thought about it, the more he began to see the parallels between the boy and himself. Naruto was an unloved, an unwanted child cast aside by the world. Sukuna knew what that was like. He, too, was an unloved, unwanted, wretched brat no one cared for, born into a life of scorn and isolation. He too had been called a monster, shunned and scorned, cast out like trash to fend for himself. The memories of his own childhood rose unbidden, sharp and raw despite the centuries that had passed. Both of them had been rejected, ridiculed, and left to fend for themselves. Yet, their paths had diverged in the most profound way. Naruto, despite the hatred he carried within him, kept his bitterness buried deep within him. He refused to let it define him. He sought love, acceptance, and acknowledgement, desperately clinging to the hope that if he worked hard enough he'd be accepted like everyone else. He chose to endure the pain rather than inflict it on others. Sukuna, on the other hand, had chosen the opposite path. He had embraced his hatred, allowed it to consume him, and used it to carve his name into history. He had struck back at the world that had scorned him, carving a bloody path to the top out of spite and bitterness. His power had grown, but so had his loneliness. Even in his prime, surrounded by fear and reverence, Sukuna had been alone. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, as he looked at the unconscious boy. "You're nothing like me, brat," Sukuna said, his voice carrying a strange mix of bitterness and respect. "I'd burn the world for the way it treated me. You're trying to save it, even when it doesn't deserve it. Why didn't you lash out? Why didn't you crush them underfoot like the insects they are? You have the power, even if you don't know it yet. That fox inside you, it's more than enough to wipe this village off the map." The boy's memories revealed moments when Naruto had come close. Times when the darkness in his heart whispered temptations to strike back, to give in to the anger and pain. But Naruto had always stopped himself, always pulled back. Not because he lacked the will, but because he chose not to. Sukuna thought back to his own childhood, the jeers, the beatings, the endless nights of hunger and loneliness. Sukuna had risen above it all, not through kindness or hope, but through sheer, unrelenting hatred. His strength had been forged in the fires of vengeance, his name whispered in fear by those who had once scorned him. But even at the height of his power, surrounded by legions who worshipped him, Sukuna had felt the same emptiness he had known as a child. And now, here was this boy, this insignificant child who had every reason to lash out, to destroy, and yet he didn't. Naruto's anger was there, simmering beneath the surface, but it didn't consume him. He sought connection, not destruction. He wanted to be loved, not feared. Naruto had something Sukuna hadn't, an indomitable will that defied all logic. Even in the face of rejection, even when it would have been easier to give up or strike back, the boy clung to the belief that things could get better. He pulled pranks not out of malice, but because he wanted to be seen, to be acknowledged. Publicity, no matter how negative, was better than being invisible. It baffled Sukuna, but he couldn't help but smile. This boy was interesting, different. You're either the biggest fool I've ever seen, or you're something else entirely. Either way, you're starting to amuse me, Naruto Uzumaki. Chapter 5, Why Am I Alone? Author's note, frowny face. There's something I realized I hadn't clarified earlier, so I'll address it now. The Naruto in this story isn't the carefree, happy-go-lucky hyperactive idiot we see in canon. Well, he's still hyperactive to a point. Anyways, as we know, Naruto is kind-hearted and incredibly forgiving, but let's be honest, the village is lucky he turned out that way. Considering all the torment he endured, it wouldn't have been surprising if he became consumed by hatred, like Sasuke, or spiraled into darkness, like Obito. In fact, Naruto himself admitted to Sasuke during their battle at the Valley of the End that he could have easily ended up just like him. As Naruto himself admitted to Sasuke at the Valley of the End, it wouldn't have taken much for him to walk the same path of vengeance and hatred. The key difference is that Naruto had people who showed him kindness and gave him the strength to keep believing in himself. From the kindness of Tuchi and I am at Ichiraku Ramen, to Iruka's genuine affection and Hiruzen's quiet support, and others who, in their own ways, helped him carry on. These connections kept him grounded and gave him hope and made all the difference in shaping who Naruto became. But what if they hadn't been enough? What if Naruto, in a rare moment of introspection, looked back at his life and questioned what he truly wanted? Let's face it, Naruto didn't really want to be Hokage. It was just a symbol, a goal he clung to because it represented something deeper. What Naruto really wanted was to be acknowledged, to matter, to feel loved. This story explores a darker Naruto, not evil, but no longer the overly optimistic boy who shrugs off all the pain as if it doesn't affect him. He will face hard trials, confront difficult truths, and make choices that will challenge his beliefs and redefine who he is. He's still Naruto at his core, but this version of him is more introspective and far less willing to tolerate the injustices he's endured. Root headquarters was completely hidden from the public eye. It lay deep beneath Konoha. It was a covert organization founded by a man twisted by his selfish and evil ambitions. His name was Danzo Shimura. Root carried out morally questionable missions under his orders. If he felt someone or something was a threat to the village or his plans, they were either manipulated or killed, even if they were once a part of the clan. The facility had labyrinth tunnels intended to confuse and trap those who entered without authorization, and it had seals and mineralized dust which prevented the Byakugan from being used to locate or find one's way through the facility. At the heart of it, in a dimly lit room, sat Danzo Shimura. His one visible eye stared into the distance, unblinking and calculating, as though dissecting a plan only he could see. In front of him, an agent materialized from the shadows, kneeling in submission. The Root operatives were ghosts, unseen and unheard until summoned, and this one was no exception. He spoke in a tone completely devoid of emotion. Danzo-sama, I bring a report regarding the Jinchuriki, Naruto Uzumaki. Danzo's visible eye narrowed slightly, the only sign of his interest. Speak. The Jinchuriki was discovered unconscious in his apartment. The agent began. According to reports, he was found on the floor with blood pooling from his nose. The third Hokage received a complaint from the Jinchuriki's landlord and personally investigated the matter. He then transported the boy to the hospital. Danzo's fingers tapped once on the armrest of his chair, the faint sound echoing in the oppressive silence. The Hokage, Danzo said slowly, is far too sentimental. He continues to coddle the boy despite his potential. The agent waited for a moment, then continued. There are concerns regarding the seal. The Hokage has stationed ANBU to guard the hospital room, and the staff is under strict orders to monitor any abnormalities. However, the specifics of the seal's condition remain unclear. The seal, of course, Hiruzen would prioritize maintaining the boy's containment over leveraging his potential. A critical weakness of his leadership. If he had the boy under proper surveillance, there wouldn't be an issue. Danzo began processing the implications of this information. The seal crafted by the Fourth Hokage was a masterpiece of Fuinjutsu designed to contain the immense power of the Nine Tails. If there were signs of instability, it could mean any number of things: tampering, an external threat, or even an unknown reaction within the boy himself. Do we have any insight into what caused the Jinchuriki's collapse? Danzo asked. Not yet, Danzo-sama, the agent replied. The hospital staff reported fluctuating chakra levels and strain on his chakra network. But the Hokage has restricted access to the boy's medical records. No one outside his trusted circle knows more. Danzo's expression darkened, his fingers tightening slightly on the armrests. The secrecy surrounding the Jinchuriki was a constant thorn in his side. Hiruzen's insistence on shielding the boy from scrutiny only compounded the risk he posed. Foolish sentimentality. The boy is a weapon, not a child. To waste time protecting him instead of preparing him is to jeopardize the future of this village, Danzo said, his disdain for Hiruzen clear in his tone. He leaned back, his posture deceptively relaxed as his Min-5 continued working through the possibilities. If the seal were to fail, the Nine-Tails' power could destabilize, posing an existential threat to Konoha like 8 years ago. But if the boy's condition could be leveraged, if Root could gain control over the Jinchuriki, it would be a boon of unimaginable magnitude. Continue monitoring the situation. The moment the Hokage's vigilance falters, I want every detail of the boy's condition brought to me. I will not allow this to slip through our grasp, Danzo commanded. Yes, Danzo-sama. The agent bowed deeply before vanishing into the shadows, leaving Danzo alone with his thoughts. The silence in the room deepened as Danzo considered his next move. The Jinchuriki represented an untapped well of power, a force that, if harnessed correctly, could ensure Konoha's dominance for generations. But the boy was also a liability. His lack of discipline, his emotional fragility, and the Hokage's incessant meddling were obstacles that needed to be addressed. Danzo's visible eye narrowed as his lips curled into a faint, humorless smile. Soon, the boy will understand his purpose. And when that time comes, Konoha will no longer rely on the weak will of Hiruzen Sarutobi. For the sake of the village, sacrifices must be made, he said to himself, as he rose from his chair and turned to leave the room. For now, he would wait. But his patience was not limitless. The Jinchuriki was a key, one that Danzo intended to use, no matter the cost. With Naruto. Naruto was still laying in the hospital bed. It had been 2 days since he collapsed in his apartment. The faint hum of machines and the occasional beeping of a heart monitor filled the otherwise silent room. His hand twitched and he let out a small groan as he regained consciousness, then slowly he opened his eyes. His vision was a bit blurry. He squinted, turning his head to take in his surroundings when a sudden burning sensation made him flinch. Ugh! Naruto let out a groan, swatting at the source of discomfort. Stay still, boy, a male voice said. Naruto blinked as his eyelids were held open and a light shone directly into his pupils. The man inspected him without much care before finally turning off the light and stepping back. Naruto blinked again, his vision slowly clearing. He glanced around the room, taking in his surroundings. He saw an unfamiliar ceiling, 2 ENBU stationed near the door, and then feeling something in his arm he looked down and saw the 4 needle taped in place. Naruto realized he was in the hospital. What happened? Naruto asked as he sat up in bed. 2 days ago, Lord Third found you collapsed on the flood of your apartment and brought you here. He'll be on his way shortly. It wasn't the medic who answered. He had already turned away, jotting down notes on a clipboard with disinterest. Instead, one of the ANBU stepped forward and answered. Naruto nodded slowly, processing the information. He noticed the way the nurses and doctors in the room moved, their gazes not once meeting his as though he were invisible. One nurse visibly stiffened when their eyes briefly met, quickly turning away as though she hadn't seen him at all. Naruto felt the familiar pang in his chest but said nothing, lowering his gaze to his lap. Minutes passed in silence, then Naruto heard the door open and looked up. Herzuin entered the room and rushed over to him. Naruto, my boy, how are you feeling? Herzuin asked, placing a hand on his shoulder. I'm fine, I think, old man. A little stiff, but that's it. Naruto responded, scratching the back of his head. Hiruzen smiled gently, though his eyes betrayed a deeper worry. I'm glad to hear that, Naruto. I was worried when I found you unconscious in your apartment. I received a call from the landlord apparently. Some tenants heard you crying as though you were in pain. When I got there, your door was locked, so I knocked and called your name, but you didn't answer. I had to use the spare key to get in. That's when I found you collapsed on the floor with your nose bleeding. Herzuin explained. Do you remember what happened? Anything suspicious? Naruto sat there processing what Hiruzen told him, and he tried his hardest to remember what happened that day. But he couldn't remember much. Sorry, old man, I don't remember much. I think my head felt fuzzy when I got home. I tried drinking some water, but it didn't help, so I drank some milk instead, but... He hesitated, his nose wrinkling in disgust. It was spoiled. I spit most of it out, but after that, everything went dark. Wait, no, I think I was in pain? I see. Does your head hurt now? Or do you recall your stomach hurting at all that day, even for a moment? Hiruzen asked, stroking his beard. Naruto shook his head. No, not really. Sorry, old man. The Hokage sighed but gave him a reassuring smile. It's fine, Naruto. What matters is that you're alright now. Okay, so does this mean I can go home? I don't really like hospitals, especially the food, Naruto said, looking at Hiruzen. Hiruzen stroked his beard thoughtfully as he considered Naruto's words. I'm sorry, Naruto, but I'd like you to stay here for at least another day so the medics can keep an eye on you. However, I'll arrange for one of the ANBU to bring you some ramen from Ichiraku's. How does that sound? Hiruzen asked, his voice warm and steady. Naruto's face brightened at the mention of ramen, but the light in his eyes didn't quite reach the corners. Yeah, sure. That sounds great, old man, Naruto said with a small, forced grin, rubbing the back of his head. To anyone else, Naruto's request might have seemed perfectly normal, just a kid excited about his favorite meal and disliking hospital food. But Hiruzen saw past the boy's smile, past the surface-level cheerfulness. He knew what Naruto was really asking. Do I have to stay here, with people who ignore me, who act like I don't exist, or worse, like I shouldn't exist at all? The thought made Hiruzen's heart ache, though he kept his expression composed. He placed a reassuring hand on Naruto's shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. Don't worry, my boy. You'll be home soon enough. Just rest for now, alright? Hiruzen said. Naruto nodded, the small smile still on his face, but Hiruzen could feel the faint tension in the boy's posture. As Hiruzen stood up, he made a mental note to speak with the medical staff again. He'd given them strict instructions to treat Naruto like any other patient, but the lingering hostility of some villagers was a difficult tide to turn. Thanks, old man. Guess I'll just try to get some sleep, Naruto said. A few hours later, Naruto sat up in his hospital bed, the aroma of freshly made ramen filling the small room. A bowl from Ichiraku's rested in his hands, steam curling upward and warming his face. He took a deep breath, his stomach growling loudly before he dug in, slurping the noodles eagerly. Man, this is way better than hospital food, Naruto said between bites, his voice muffled by the mouthful of noodles. Hiruzen chuckled softly, watching the boy with a faint smile. I thought you'd appreciate it. You've been through a lot these past few days, Naruto. You deserve this. Naruto paused for a moment, his chopsticks hovering over the bowl. Thanks, old man. For everything. He didn't look up as he spoke, his voice quieter than usual. Hiruzen's expression softened. You don't have to thank me, my boy. Just focus on getting better. He placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder briefly before standing. I have some matters to attend to, but I'll check on you tomorrow. Rest well, Naruto, Hiruzen said, his tone warm but firm. Yeah, sure. See you later, old man, Naruto replied, flashing a grin as he returned to his ramen. Hiruzen lingered for a moment, his gaze lingering on the boy before he turned and left the room, the door closing softly behind him. Naruto finished the bowl quickly, setting it aside as he leaned back against the pillows. The room was quiet again, save for the faint hum of the monitors. He stared at the ceiling, his hands behind his head, his thoughts swirling as his eyelids grew heavy. Within moments, sleep claimed him, and the room fell silent once more. Next day. The faint glow of morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting soft patterns on the hospital walls. Naruto stirred, shifting beneath the thin blanket as his eyes blinked open groggily. Ugh, hospitals, Naruto mumbled, rubbing his eyes as he sat up. His stomach grumbled loudly, and he frowned. Man, I'm already hungry again. Then the door opened, and Hiruzen entered with 2 medics in tow. The ANBU stationed in the room straightened silently. Good morning, Naruto, Hiruzen said warmly. How are you feeling? I'm fine, old man. Just stiff, that's all, Naruto replied, flashing a grin. Hiruzen chuckled softly. Let the medics finish checking you over, and you'll be free to go. Just don't overdo it today, alright? Once the medics cleared him and left, Naruto quickly changed out of the hospital gown and into his clothes. Minutes later, he was leaping across rooftops, the crisp morning air whipping through his hair. It was faster this way, no crowds, no insults, no glares, just open space and the sound of his feet pounding against the roofs as he made his way home to grab his bag before heading to the academy. As Naruto landed on the roof of his apartment, he took a deep breath, letting the morning breeze fill his lungs. The scent of the village, a mix of fresh dew, cooking fires, and the distant hum of life was always better up here. He hurried inside, grabbed his backpack, and headed back out without wasting a second. But as he took his first leap toward the academy, his stomach growled loudly, reminding him he hadn't eaten since the ramen Hiruzen had brought him. Naruto groaned, clutching his midsection. Man, I need to fuel up before class. Guess there's time for a quick stop. Ichiraku Ramen wasn't far, and Naruto made it there in record time. Dropping down into the alley behind the stand, Naruto slipped around to the front, where Tucci was already preparing for the day. Yo, old man Tucci! Can I get some ramen to go? Naruto called, entering with a grin. Tucci looked up from the pot, his face lighting up. Naruto! It's been a couple of days, good to see you. And I see you're up early today. Sure thing miso, right? You know it. Thanks, Tucci, Naruto said, already digging into his pocket for coins. Within minutes, Tucci handed him a small, steaming container wrapped neatly for travel. There you go. Don't spill it while you're running, alright? And eat it before it gets cold, Tucci said with a wink. Thanks, old man. You're the best, Naruto said as he dashed out of the stand, the container in his hands. Naruto hopped back onto the rooftops, the warm bowl cradled in his arms. As he ran, he began eating on the move as he made his way toward the academy. At the academy. By the time the academy came into view, the bowl was empty, and Naruto's energy was back in full force. He tossed the container into a bin near the entrance, wiped his hands on his pants, and strode toward the gates with his usual confidence. Inside the gates, the other students who had arrived earlier were busy chatting in small groups. Laughter and conversation could be heard. Those entering alongside Naruto moved in pairs or clusters, their voices overlapping as they headed to their classrooms. But the moment Naruto passed through the gates, the lively chatter faltered. Students turned their heads, their conversations turning to whispers as they stole glances at him out of the corner of their eyes. Some glared openly, their expressions filled with irritation or disdain. Others avoided his gaze altogether, choosing instead to walk away as though his very presence was a curse. Naruto felt the sting of their reactions, the familiar ache settling in his chest. What's their problem? He wondered. It's not like I did anything today, but he buried the feeling quickly, plastering a wide grin on his face as he raised a hand in greeting. Morning, everyone! He shouted, his voice echoing through the courtyard. The response was immediate. Students rolled their eyes, muttered to each other, or turned their backs completely. A girl near the gates crossed her arms with an annoyed huff, while another boy whispered something to his friend that made them both snicker. Why is he even here? One boy muttered, loud enough for Naruto to hear. Don't make eye contact, a girl whispered. Damn demon, another boy said. Naruto's grin faltered for half a second before he forced it back into place. Ignored the sting in his chest as he stuffed his hands into his pockets, and walked toward the building with exaggerated nonchalance. They don't matter, he told himself, his grin widening despite the lump forming in his throat. Naruto walked through the building until he reached his classroom. He pushed open the door with his usual enthusiasm, his grin wide as he stepped inside. As Naruto entered, the room fell into a brief, uncomfortable silence. A few students glanced up, their expressions ranging from mild annoyance to outright disdain. Others avoided looking at him altogether, pretending to stay absorbed in their conversations. Naruto ignored the looks, his focus landing on their sensei, Irika Yumino, who was busy organizing papers at his desk near the front of the room. Yo, Irika-sensei! Naruto called out, waving enthusiastically as he approached the desk. Morning, Naruto. How are you feeling? I heard about what happened from Lord Hokage, Irika said. Naruto scratched the back of his head, his grin turning sheepish. Oh, that? I'm fine, sensei. Just needed a little nap, that's all. Irika's expression turned a bit stern as he said, That little nap had the Hokage himself bringing you to the hospital, Naruto. You weren't home when I stopped by to check on you yesterday. Naruto blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Wait, you came by my place? Irika nodded, crossing his arms. I wanted to drop off the notes you missed last week. When I saw the Hokage, he told me you'd collapsed. You're sure you're alright? Totally. No big deal. I'm tougher than I look, you know. Naruto waved a dismissive hand, his tone upbeat. Irika chuckled lightly, though the concern in his eyes lingered. If you say so. Just make sure you're taking care of yourself, alright? We can't have you passing out in class. Naruto gave him a thumbs up. You got it, sensei! Turning toward the class, Naruto made his way to his seat in the back of the classroom, his footsteps echoing slightly in the quiet room. As he walked past, a few students shot glares at him or whispered under their breath. Kiba was the first to speak up, his voice loud and mocking. Well, look who finally decided to show up. What's the matter, Naruto? Too weak to make it through a day without collapsing? Naruto stopped in his tracks, turning to face Kiba with a glare. What's your problem, Kiba? At least I don't smell like a wet dog every day, Naruto said, crossing his arms as a grin crept back onto his face. Several students burst into laughter at the jab, while Kiba's smirk vanished in an instant. What did you say, you idiot? Kiba growled, half rising from his chair. Just telling it like it is. Maybe if you spent more time training and less time barking, you'd actually be good at something, Naruto said, his voice dripping with mockery. Kiba clenched his fists as his face turned red from humiliation. You want to say that again, Naruto? Oh, you heard me. You can't even hit a target without Akamaru doing all the work, Naruto said, his grin widening as the laughter around them grew louder. Better than being the dead last of the class, fox boy, Kiba shot back, his tone sharper now. From the side, Shikamaru sighed, his head resting on his arms as he said, Troublesome. Can't you two ever just sit down without starting something? Naruto shot Shikamaru a quick look before snapping back to Kiba. I'll show you who's the dead last when I wipe the floor with you in sparring, dog breath. Kiba laughed, crossing his arms. Yeah, right. You couldn't beat a log, let alone me. Choji, sitting nearby with a bag of chips, chimed in with a mouthful. Naruto's got a point, Kiba. You do rely on Akamaru a lot, Choji said, crunching noisily. Kiba turned to Choji, his face scrunching in disbelief. Whose side are you on? Besides, Akamaru is my partner. Naruto grinned triumphantly, pointing at Kiba. See? Even Choji knows you're all bark and no bite. The exchange earned a few chuckles from the random students in the room, though most still avoided looking directly at Naruto. Despite the playful insults, the air in the classroom felt lighter if only for a moment. Naruto slumped into his seat in the back, crossing his arms and propping his feet up on the desk in front of him. Keep talking, Kiba. I'll prove you wrong in class today, Naruto said, his grin wide and confident. Whatever, loser, Kiba shot back. As Naruto and the others waited for the other students to arrive and class to begin, he turned his gaze to the window. He propped his chin in his hand, the warm sunlight streaming through the glass casting soft patterns on his desk. His bright blue eyes reflected a mixture of boredom and thoughtfulness as he watched the leaves outside sway gently in the breeze. Why does everyone hate me so much? The question nagged at the back of his mind, surfacing uninvited as it always did in moments like this. He glanced around the classroom briefly, catching the occasional side eye or sneer from his peers. I haven't done anything to them, so why? He clenched his jaw the thoughts, but then he forced himself to shake them off, ruffling his hair and sitting up straight. Nope, not thinking about that. Gotta stay focused, he said to himself, determination flaring in his chest as he clenched a fist. One day, I'll be Hokage, and they'll all see. A faint grin spread across his face, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. He leaned back in his chair and stretched his arms over his head, forcing his usual cheerful demeanor to return as he glanced back toward the window. Yeah, one day. Unbeknownst to Naruto, a pair of soft lavender eyes watched him from across the room. Hinata Hyuga sat quietly at her desk, her hands clasped together, as she watched him. She saw the brief moment of sadness on his face, the way his shoulders slumped slightly before he straightened up and forced a smile. Her chest tightened at the sight. He's so strong, she thought, her cheeks flushing lightly as she watched him. No matter how they treat him, no matter what he goes through, he never gives up. I wish I could be that brave. Hinata's gaze lingered on the way his hair caught the sunlight streaming through the window, the golden tips glinting faintly against the deeper red beneath. It was striking, vibrant, so much like him. She'd never seen anyone else with hair like his, and though it often made him the target of teasing, she thought it was beautiful. Her gaze turned briefly toward Sakura Haruno, who sat across the room chatting with Ino. Hinata's expression faltered. She knew Naruto had a crush on Sakura, everyone did. The way he lit up whenever Sakura spoke to him, even if it was to scold him or call him an idiot, was impossible to miss. I wish he'd look at me like that, she thought, the familiar ache of jealousy settling in her chest. She glanced back at Naruto, her face softening again. But even if he doesn't, I still want to see him smile. I just want him to be happy, Hinata thought to herself. Then the peacefulness of the classroom broke as the door slid open, all heads turning toward the figure who walked in. Sasuke Uchiha strolled into the room, his hands stuffed casually into his pockets, his sharp black eyes scanning the room with disinterest. Naruto, who had been leaning back in his chair, nearly fell over as he straightened up. "TCH, of course it's him," he muttered under his breath, slumping forward onto his desk. A few moments later, the classroom door was thrown open with enough force to rattle the frame, and chaos erupted. "Move, forehead!" Ino snapped, grabbing Sakura's arm to shove her back. "Not a chance, Ino pig!" Sakura shouted, elbowing her rival in the side. Ino Yamanaka and Sakura Haruno burst through the doorway, shoving and elbowing each other in their desperate bid to get inside. Behind them, a swarm of other girls surged forward, each vying for position as they clamored to get closer to Sasuke. "Calm down, there's enough Sasuke-kun for everyone," another girl chimed in, pushing her way through the crowd that was behind the two girls fighting to get in. Naruto groaned louder, slumping forward until his forehead hit his desk. "Lucky, arrogant bastard," he said, glaring at Sasuke, who ignored the chaos entirely and had already taken his seat without so much as a glance at his admirers. "Agreed," Kiba said, his voice carrying the same annoyed tone as Naruto's. Naruto turned his head toward Kiba, raising an eyebrow. The two rarely saw eye to eye, but in that moment, their mutual annoyance with Sasuke was undeniable. The stampede reached its climax as one of the girls only Kami knows how slipped past both Ino and Sakura, and tripped over a desk leg, sending papers and books flying in every direction. "This is ridiculous," Naruto said, watching as the girl scrambled to her feet, her face red with embarrassment as she scrambled to gather her scattered belongings. But the chaos didn't stop there. Another girl, in her haste to push through the crowd, accidentally knocked over a chair, which toppled into a desk causing a bunch of noise. Kiba sighed, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed. "You'd think they're fighting for their lives or something. Fighting for Sasuke's attention is basically the same thing," Naruto replied, shaking his head as yet another girl tripped, this time over the collapsed desk and landed flat on her stomach with a loud oof. The chaos spiraled even further when a smaller girl at the back of the group attempted to squeeze past Sakura and Ino, only to be elbowed by both at the same time. "Back of the line!" Sakura shouted, her voice sharp as she shoved the girl aside. "Yeah, you're not getting in my way," Ino added, practically shoving her entire body weight into Sakura to force her out of the doorway. This only enraged Sakura further. "Forehead? Pig!" Ino snapped back. As the two resumed their heated argument, the other girls attempted to squeeze past them in the narrow doorway, causing even more shoving and tripping. One girl accidentally stepped on another's foot, prompting a shriek and a loud, "Watch it, idiot!" Naruto watched the madness unfold with wide eyes before letting his forehead hit the desk in defeat. "What the hell is wrong with them?" "They're broken," Kiba replied simply. The madness finally culminated when one particularly desperate girl climbed over a desk in an attempt to bypass the bottleneck at the doorway. She made it halfway before slipping, her foot knocking a stack of books onto another girl's head, sending the whole group into a shouting match. Sasuke, meanwhile, sat at his desk as though nothing had happened, his chin resting on his hand as he stared out the window. The noise and chaos swirling around him didn't even register. Naruto and Kiba exchanged a look, both shaking their heads in disbelief. "Lucky, arrogant bastard," Naruto muttered, slumping back in his chair. "Seriously, why does this guy get all the attention?" Kiba said, clearly irritated. "It's just the stupid hair and the brooding. That's it. If I sat there brooding like an idiot, they'd probably just throw stuff at me," Naruto said, crossing his arms, also irritated by this. Kiba chuckled. "Honestly? Yeah, they probably would." Kiba snorted, leaning forward. "Oh, trust me, they would. I tried it once, you know. Thought maybe sitting in the back with my arms crossed, doing the whole cool, silent guy thing would work. I even practiced my smoldering in the mirror." Naruto blinked at him. "You what?" "Yeah," Kiba said, throwing his arms up. "I had my hood up, arms crossed, leaning against the wall like, what's up? I don't care about anything. Thought I was killing it. But you know what happened?" "No, what?" Naruto asked, curious. Kiba slammed his hands on his desk. "Not a damn thing. Not one girl. I got nothing." Naruto burst out laughing, nearly falling out of his chair. "You serious? Not even one?" "Not one. All I got was Shino asking me if I was okay and Akamaru giving me that look, you know, the you're embarrassing us both look." Kiba flopped back into his seat, arms crossed, glaring at the front of the room. "I even tried brooding for a whole week. You know what that got me? A sore neck and 0 hitches." Naruto slapped his desk, tears forming in his eyes from laughing so hard. "Oh man, Kiba, I can't breathe." "Laugh it up, Naruto," Kiba grumbled, despite the small smile he had. "It's not funny, man. We're out here working hard, trying to impress somebody, and Sasuke just shows up, sits down, and boom, instant harem." Naruto wiped his eyes, finally catching his breath. "You're not wrong, though. We're out here breaking our backs, and he doesn't even try." Kiba nodded. "Exactly. Brooding doesn't work for the rest of us, Naruto. We're just background characters in this guy's stupid story." Behind them, Hinata sat frozen, her lavender eyes wide as she overheard the conversation. Her face turned bright red as she lowered her head, trying to disappear into her chair. She wasn't used to hearing Naruto talk about things like this. But then, Naruto spoke again. "You're right, Kiba. I mean, look at me. I'm awesome, right? I've got cool hair, a killer smile. And 0 girls lining up." Kiba interrupted, grinning. "Hey!" Naruto shot back, pointing a finger at him. Kiba shrugged. "I'm just saying. You and me, Naruto? We're not getting any girls with brooding. It's a lost cause, man." Hinata's heart sank slightly as she stared down at her hands. Is that how he feels? That no one likes him? She thought, her fingers twisting together nervously. She wished she could tell him he was wrong, that she liked him just the way he was, but the words caught in her throat. Naruto sighed dramatically, slumping forward. "Fine, no more brooding. But there's gotta be something else, right? I mean, I can't be stuck like this forever." "Honestly, it's a lost cause," Kiba said. Naruto couldn't help but agree. "Yeah, you're probably right." Amid the commotion, Hinata's gaze returned to Naruto. She noticed the way his expression shifted, the irritation in his narrowed eyes, the slight pout on his lips, and the way he crossed his arms in mock frustration as he muttered about Sasuke under his breath. A small smile formed. "He's not like the others," she thought, her hands clasping tighter as her heart fluttered. "Even when he's frustrated, even when he's annoyed, he's still so full of energy. He's amazing." Her smile faded slightly as she watched Naruto glance toward Sakura, his expression softening ever so briefly before he turned back to Kiba. Hinata's chest ached again. Still, she couldn't tear her eyes away from him. One day I'll be brave enough to talk to him. To tell him. Her thoughts trailed off as the noise in the classroom began to settle, and she quickly looked down at her desk, her cheeks burning. Finally, having had enough of the chaos and chatter, Iruka slammed his hands on his desk, the sound reverberating through the room like a crack of thunder. "All right, that's enough!" Iruka shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. "All of you, sit down and quiet down, now!" The classroom fell silent instantly, the students scrambling to find their seats under Iruka's stern glare. Even Naruto, who had been mid-conversation with Kiba about Operation Get Hitches, immediately slumped into his chair with a sheepish grin. Kiba snickered under his breath, but a single glance from Iruka shut him up, leaving the room in tense silence. Iruka scanned the classroom, his dark eyes narrowing as he took in the scattered desks, the girls still flustered from their stampede towards Sasuke, and the overall mess left in the chaos. "This is a classroom, not a battlefield," he said firmly, folding his arms. "You're here to learn, not to cause a riot." Naruto raised his hand hesitantly. Technically, Iruka-sensei, it wasn't a riot." Iruka's glare pinned him in place. "Naruto, I don't want to hear it." "Right. Got it," Naruto said as he sank into his seat with a nervous chuckle. Satisfied that the room was under control, Iruka sighed and straightened up. "Now, before we begin today's lesson, let's go over the—" The door slid open abruptly, cutting him off. Mizuki stepped into the room with a pleasant smile plastered across his face. "Good morning, Iruka." "Sorry for interrupting," Mizuki said, his tone warm and friendly. "I just wanted to check in and help with the morning session." Iruka nodded. "Good morning, Mizuki. Thanks for coming." Mizuki's gaze swept across the classroom, landing briefly on Naruto. His smile didn't falter, but there was the faintest flicker of something in his eyes, disdain, perhaps, or irritation. Naruto, oblivious as ever, grinned brightly. "Yo, Mizuki-sensei!" he called out, waving enthusiastically. Mizuki's smile widened, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Good morning, Naruto," he replied. "I hope you're ready to work hard today." "Always," Naruto said, puffing out his chest proudly. Mizuki chuckled softly, but his thoughts were far from kind. Such an annoying little brat. He's got no idea how much everyone wishes he'd just disappear. Damn demon brat. Iruka cleared his throat, drawing Mizuki's attention. "Let's get started," Iruka said as Mizuki took a seat. As the students settled into their seats, Irika began explaining the day's lesson. All right, everyone, open your textbooks. Today, we'll be reviewing the history of the shinobi world, starting with the founding of Konoha. A collective groan rose from the classroom, echoed by Naruto's exaggerated sigh. He leaned back in his chair, holding his book upside down like it was a chore just to touch it. Ugh, why do we need to learn this history stuff? Naruto muttered to himself, flipping lazily through the pages without even looking at the words. What's the point? It's not like knowing about a bunch of old guys is gonna help me become Hokage. Kiba, seated nearby, smirked. Maybe it'll teach you how to not screw up, Naruto. Yeah, right. Naruto shot back, glaring at the book like it personally offended him. All this first Hokage this and Madara Uchiha that. Who cares? They're all dead. Irika's eyes twitched as he paused mid-sentence, glancing at Naruto. Naruto, this history isn't just about the past. It's about understanding the sacrifices that built this village and learning from them. Naruto rolled his eyes, grumbling under his breath. Sacrifices, schmifices. I'd rather be learning some cool jutsu instead of this boring junk. Meanwhile, inside of Naruto. Inside Naruto's mindscape, Sukuna sat lazily on his throne, his crimson eyes narrowing as he continued to observe the classroom through Naruto's senses. His posture was relaxed, as 3 of his 4 arms rested casually on the throne, while the 4th propped up his head as he leaned slightly forward. That's more like it, Sukuna said, irritated. Finally something worth paying attention to. That fangirl nonsense was intolerable. Obsessing over a boy who barely acknowledges their existence, it's pathetic. As Irika's voice continued on, reciting passages from the textbook, Sukuna focused on the information being relayed. Madara Uchiha Hashirama Senju, so those are the names tied to this village's foundation, he said to himself. Both hailed from rival clans yet forged an alliance powerful enough to create this so-called Konoha. It's almost amusing, knowing peace rarely lasts between men of ambition. He leaned forward slightly, as he listened to Irika's voice and read the text through Naruto's eyes. But at least we're finally getting somewhere. History might be dull for you, but I can assure you, it's far more valuable than you realize. His gaze sharpened as he took in the sight of Sasuke through Naruto's peripheral vision. So that brooding child is an Uchiha, he noted. A descendant of one of the most feared clans in this history of yours. Yet, despite that lineage, the boy's chakra is laughably underwhelming compared to yours. Sukuna leaned back slightly, continuing his observations. This boy you call Sasuke, perhaps there's potential buried somewhere within him, but it's nothing impressive now. You, on the other hand, he added, focusing on Naruto's perspective, are an entirely different story. Even without the fox, your chakra far exceeds not just him, but every other weakling in this room, including the teachers. His tone turned slightly contemplative. So this is the difference between cursed energy and chakra. Unlike the energy of my world, which remains fixed from birth, this chakra can be molded, increased, and refined. It's a curious system, one with far fewer limitations than I expected. For a moment, Sukuna went silent as he processed the significance of what he had learned. Still, power alone means nothing if it isn't tempered with understanding. And from the looks of it, this world's history is more blood-soaked than these texts are willing to admit. Conveniently cleaned up for the sake of their young, no doubt. Irika continued to read as the students followed along in their textbooks. Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha were 2 of the strongest shinobi of their time, Irika explained. Their combined efforts led to the founding of this village, bringing peace to an era of constant war. Hashirama was revered as the god of shinobi, a title earned through his unparalleled mastery of wood release, a Kekkei Genkai unique to him, his immense chakra reserves, and his ability to heal without hand signs. The classroom was unusually quiet, the students captivated by the story, though some were visibly struggling to stay awake. Naruto, slouched in his seat, stared blankly at the page in front of him, his mind already wandering. Irika continued, his tone growing heavier. Madara Uchiha, on the other hand, was the leader of the Uchiha clan, wielding the Sharingan to its fullest potential and commanding overwhelming power on the battlefield. His power was said to rival Hashirama's, making them both feared and respected across the shinobi world. Together, they forged the foundation of what would become the Hidden Leaf Village. However, their alliance was not destined to last. Despite their efforts to bring peace, their conflicting ideals eventually drove them apart. Madara believed the Uchiha were being oppressed, and sought power through domination, while Hashirama sought to unite all the clans under a single banner. Their disagreement culminated in a final battle at the Valley of the End. The battle was said to have shaped the very land itself. The two men fought with such ferocity that the valley was carved by their strength alone. A few students whispered among themselves, their curiosity piqued by the story. Even Sasuke seemed to listen more intently, his eyes narrowing slightly as he absorbed the information. Naruto blinked, sitting up slightly. Whoa, they were that strong? Iruka gestured to the blackboard, where a map of Konoha's surrounding areas was pinned. The Valley of the End is now marked by two massive statues, one of Madara and one of Hashirama, standing as eternal reminders of their struggle. In their final clash, Hashirama emerged victorious, ultimately killing Madara to protect the peace they had both once dreamed of. Inside Naruto's mindscape, Sukuna's eyes narrowed, his posture shifting slightly as he absorbed the information. Interesting. So these two were the ones who shaped this world, Madara Uchiha and Hashirama Senju. Titles like God of Shinobi aren't given lightly. The Senju and Uchiha clan were definitely special. These two men alone were both feared and respected across the world, not an easy feat. Sukuna said, tapping his fingers lightly on the armrest of his throne. The strength they wielded, Hashirama with his mastery over nature itself, and Madara with those strange eyes. To command such power and still be mortal, it's a curiosity worth exploring. And once again, the boy Sasuke, to think he shares blood with a clan once led by a man as formidable as Madara. Yet there's no sign of that strength in him. This world's potential for growth and refinement is unlike anything I've seen, but it seems few truly grasp it. Back in the classroom, Iruka closed the textbook with a firm, "That's all for today's history review. Make sure to study this for the written exam next week. And remember, understanding the past is the key to shaping your future as shinobi." Naruto let out a loud groan, slumping back in his chair. "Man, that's so much stuff to remember." "You wouldn't have to remember it if you actually paid attention," Sakura snapped, turning to glare at him. "Hey! I pay attention!" Naruto protested, though his pout betrayed him. Sasuke, meanwhile, remained silent, his arms crossed as he stared out the window, seemingly lost in thought, probably thinking of killing his brother. Kiba leaned over to whisper to Naruto, "Man, this is why I hate history. Too many names, too much stuff about dead people." Naruto snorted, whispering back, "Yeah, but at least those dead guys sound awesome. Imagine carving a valley just by throwing hands." Hinata, sitting a few rows behind, glanced at Naruto nervously, her cheeks pink as she overheard the boys' conversation. Iruka cleared his throat loudly, cutting off any further chatter. "All right, settle down. We're moving on to basic chakra control exercises. Everyone, head outside to the training field." Outside. The class moved outside to the academy training field, the mid-morning sun shining brightly overhead. The soft rustling of leaves and the chirping of birds provided a serene backdrop as the students gathered in a loose circle around Iruka. "All right, everyone," Iruka began, holding up a leaf for emphasis. "Today we're focusing on a foundational skill for all shinobi, chakra control. This exercise is called the leaf concentration practice." He placed the leaf on his own forehead as a demonstration. "The goal is simple: use your chakra to keep the leaf adhered to your forehead. This will help you learn to focus your chakra precisely and maintain your concentration and prevent distractions. Chakra control is the key to mastering jutsu, and diligent focus is what separates average ninja from exceptional ones. And if you pour too much chakra into a jutsu, it'll backfire or completely fail." A few students groaned at the prospect of such a seemingly simple task. Iruka glanced around at the class, his gaze firm. "No distractions, no goofing off. This exercise may seem simple, but mastering chakra control is one of the most important skills you'll develop as a ninja." Naruto's hands clenched into fists, determination sparking in his bright eyes. "All right, this is it. No messing around. I'm gonna nail this. Irika handed out leaves to the students, who spread out across the training field to begin. Naruto placed his leaf on his forehead, pressing it firmly in place. He closed his eyes, his face scrunched in concentration as he focused on channeling his chakra. Alright, let's get started, Irika continued, distributing a leaf to each student. Place the leaf on your forehead and concentrate. Remember, it's not about forcing the chakra, it's about balance and control. Too much or too little, and it'll fall off. Naruto grabbed his leaf with a grin, slapping it onto his forehead with perhaps a bit too much enthusiasm. He clenched his fists, his face scrunching in concentration as he tried to focus his chakra. He could feel his chakra stirring, faint and unsteady as it wavered between his forehead and the leaf. Okay, focus, balance, he muttered to himself, beads of sweat forming on his brow. For a moment, the leaf stuck. Naruto's eyes shot open, a grin spreading across his face. Ha! I did it! Damn it! Naruto exclaimed, stomping his foot as he picked up the leaf and slapped it back onto his forehead. Come on, stick already! Nearby, Sakura sighed audibly. Naruto, you're supposed to stay calm and focused, not shout like an idiot. Sakura demonstrated, placing her own leaf delicately on her forehead. It stuck almost immediately. You're trying too hard, Naruto, she said, her tone sharp. You're just dumping chakra into it. That's not how it works. Naruto frowned, crossing his arms. I am calm, and I'm not dumping it. I'm distributing it. Yeah, that's it. Kiba, who was lounging nearby with Akamaru on his lap, chuckled. His leaf stuck effortlessly to his forehead. Face it, Naruto. You're just bad at this. I'm not. Naruto shot back, slapping the leaf onto his forehead again. This time, he stood still, taking a deep breath. Okay, I've got this. Focus, focus. For a moment, the leaf stayed in place. Naruto's face lit up, and he pointed to his forehead. See? I told you I could do. Before he could finish, the leaf fell off again. Naruto's shoulders slumped, and he let out a frustrated groan. Irika approached Naruto, who was now furiously rubbing his forehead as if the problem lay there instead of his chakra control. Naruto, Irika said patiently, crouching down to meet his eye level. You're putting too much pressure on yourself. Chakra control isn't about brute force, it's about balance. You need to calm your mind and focus. Take a deep breath and try again. Naruto looked up at his teacher, his expression softening slightly. I'm trying, Irika-sensei. But it's so hard. I know it's hard, Irika said with a small smile. That's why we practice. No one gets it perfect on the first try, not even the best shinobi. What matters is that you keep trying. Take your time. You'll get there. Remember, chakra control is about precision, not force. Don't try to overwhelm the leaf with your chakra. Let it flow steadily. Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Right. Steady flow. Got it. Sasuke, of course, had mastered the exercise almost immediately. His leaf stayed firmly in place as he stood with his arms crossed, looking utterly bored. Show off, Kiba muttered, glancing enviously at Sasuke before returning to his own attempt. Hinata, standing off to the side, focused intently on her own leaf. Her chakra flowed smoothly, the leaf barely wavering. But her attention kept drifting to Naruto, watching his repeated attempts with a mixture of admiration and concern. Despite his struggles, Naruto refused to give up. He tried again and again, his face scrunched in concentration as sweat dripped down his forehead. Each time the leaf fell, he growled in frustration, only to pick it up and try again. Why is this so hard? Naruto groaned, slapping the leaf back on his head. Kiba smirked from a few feet away. Maybe you're using too much chakra, Naruto. Or maybe your head's just too thick for it to stick. Shut up, dog breath! Naruto snapped, his frustration boiling over. He slapped the leaf back onto his forehead, gritting his teeth. Damn it, why is it always like this for me? Everyone else always gets things so easy. A few feet away, Shikamaru Nara sighed heavily, the leaf on his forehead perfectly stable as he lay back on the grass with his hands behind his head. Man, what a drag! This exercise isn't even hard, he muttered, his voice carrying a bored tone. Ino Yamanaka, standing nearby with a satisfied grin, chimed in. Speak for yourself, Shikamaru. I got it on the first try, too. She flicked the leaf on her forehead with a finger, showing off. Shikamaru rolled his eyes. Yeah? We all know you're perfect, Ino. What was that, lazy bum? Ino snapped, her hands on her hips. At least I'm not lying around doing nothing all the time. Whatever, Shikamaru said, waving her off with a yawn. Naruto glanced over at them, his frustration deepening. Why is it so easy for them? He thought bitterly, his grip tightening on the leaf. Meanwhile, inside Naruto's mindscape, Sukuna observed the exercise through Naruto's eyes, his crimson gaze sharp and calculating. Seated on his throne, he leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable as he analyzed every detail. This exercise, I see its purpose, Sukuna muttered to himself. Focus, discipline, control. All essential skills for a shinobi. For these weaklings, it's a decent enough challenge. Their chakra is limited, manageable. His gaze narrowed as he watched Naruto's repeated failures. But for this boy? It's useless. They've handed him the same tools and methods as these brats, despite his chakra reserves eclipsing theirs by leagues. His chakra alone is overwhelming, and with that Fox's energy bleeding into his system. Sukuna's tone turned thoughtful as he examined the faint threads of the Ninetales' energy mingling with Naruto's. Ah, the seal. Slowly but surely it leaks. The Fox's chakra merges with his own, making his reserves even more massive. It's like trying to pour an ocean into a teacup. He paused, his irritation flickering. The boy's determination is admirable, but he'll never gain control this way. He needs something more extreme, methods that match the sheer scale of his power. Sukuna's voice grew colder, his tone cutting. The incompetence of these so-called teachers is astounding. Did they not bother to assess him properly? No. They're too blinded by fear of what he carries. Or perhaps it's jealousy. His potential far outstrips any of theirs, and they never admit it. Then there's that Iruka fellow. Maybe he's just ignorant. Whether intentional or not, they're sabotaging the boy. And him? He's too naive to notice. Too desperate for their approval. He throws himself into these futile exercises with everything he has, convinced it's his own failing. Sukuna leaned back slightly, his tone turning grim. It's tragic. No matter how hard he tries, he'll never control his chakra through this nonsense. It's like trying to contain a storm in a bottle. His crimson gaze hardened as he continued. He's failed the academy twice, and not one of these fools bothered to guide him. If by some miracle he gets that leaf to stick, it won't matter. It's like lighting a bonfire with a candle, it'll barely scratch the surface of what he needs. For a moment, Sukuna sat in silence, his gaze unyielding as he observed Naruto's efforts. The fault isn't his. It's the fools around him who've failed him. With Naruto. After what felt like an eternity, Iruka clapped his hands together, signaling the end of the chakra control exercise. All right, everyone, bring your leaves back here and gather around, he called, his voice carrying across the field. The students shuffled back to the center, some grumbling, others chatting excitedly about their success or lack thereof. Naruto trudged toward Iruka, clutching his leaf with a look of sheer frustration. Don't look so down, Naruto, Iruka said with a small smile. You'll get the hang of it if you keep practicing. Yeah, Naruto muttered, stuffing the leaf into his pocket as he joined the rest of the class. Iruka straightened up, addressing the group. Now, for the next part of today's lesson, sparring practice. We'll be pairing you up to practice your taijutsu. Remember, the goal isn't to win, it's to improve. I want to see you all applying what you've learned about strategy, focus, and control. A wave of excitement rippled through the group. For many of the students, this was the highlight of the day. Finally, something fun, Kiba said, cracking his knuckles. Naruto jumped up at the announcement, his earlier frustration momentarily forgotten. Sparring, huh? He said, his fists clenching with renewed energy. This is my chance to show everyone what I've got. Iruka glanced around the group, noting the varying levels of excitement or dread on the students' faces. All right, I'll be pairing you up. Remember, this is a learning exercise, so no dirty tricks or excessive force. His gaze lingered on Kiba and Naruto for a moment, as if anticipating trouble. He began listing off pairs, sending students to designated areas of the field to begin their matches. Shikamaru, you're with Kiba. Ino, you'll spar with Sakura. Hinata, you're with Shino. Naruto leaned forward, practically bouncing on the balls of his feet as he waited for his name to be called. And finally, Naruto, you're with Sasuke, Iruka said. When Iruka said their names, the other students immediately began whispering and snickering. A few placed bets, the glint of coins flashing in their hands. Of course, Sasuke said, his tone bored as he crossed his arms. Naruto froze for a moment before breaking into a wide grin. All right. Bring it on, Sasuke. I'm gonna wipe that smug look off your face. The fangirls immediately glared daggers at him. As if you could ever beat Sasuke-kun, one of them shouted. Iruka sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Enough, everyone. Naruto and Sasuke, to the center of the field. The rest of you, sit quietly and observe. The two boys stepped forward as the students formed a loose circle around them. Naruto clenched his fists, his bright red and golden-tipped hair glinting in the sunlight. Determination burned in his blue eyes as he stared down his opponent. Sasuke stood calm and composed, his dark eyes scanning Naruto with faint disinterest, like he wasn't worth the effort. He rolled his shoulders lazily, as though he'd already won. Iruka stepped between them. Remember the rules: no jutsu, no weapons, and no hitting vital points. This is practice, not a grudge match. Understand? Both boys nodded. Sasuke's stance shifted, his weight distributed evenly, his feet planted firmly. Naruto crouched awkwardly, his fists too high and his legs spaced unevenly. Ready, begin! Iruka shouted. Naruto lunged forward immediately, fists swinging wildly. Take this! He shouted. Sasuke's eyes narrowed as he sidestepped the first punch, his movements fluid and deliberate. He ducked low, slipping past the wild swing, and countered with a sharp jab to Naruto's ribs. Naruto grunted as he stumbled back, his hand clutching his side. Too slow, Sasuke said, his tone calm and dismissive. Naruto's frustration flared. He lunged again, his movements faster but just as sloppy. This time, he aimed a low kick at Sasuke's legs. Sasuke hopped lightly over the strike, landing smoothly before countering with a spinning kick that struck Naruto's shoulder. Naruto gritted his teeth as he hit the ground, rolling to one knee before pushing himself upright. This time, Naruto hesitated. His eyes followed Sasuke's movements as the other boy stepped forward, testing his defenses. When Sasuke threw a jab, Naruto ducked low and surged forward, driving his shoulder into Sasuke's chest. Sasuke staggered slightly, his feet sliding back. Naruto pressed the attack, landing a quick jab to Sasuke's arm and another to his ribs. Sasuke winced but quickly adapted, deflecting Naruto's next punch with his forearm before stepping into his guard. Sasuke's counter came in a flash, a sharp elbow to Naruto's gut, followed by a quick sweep that sent Naruto tumbling onto his back. The crowd murmured, some students gasping at Sasuke's speed and precision. Meanwhile with Sukuna. What the hell is that stance? And who taught you that garbage? It's wide open, unbalanced, and your footing's all wrong. You might as well be begging to get knocked over. This is pathetic. The boy has power, but no one's taught him how to use it. This is due to him being left to figure things out himself, but even so, that's the shittiest stance I've ever seen in my life. He then witnessed Naruto throwing more punches and kicks, half of them not even coming close to landing. His attacks are wild and unfocused. He's learning as he fights. Sloppy, but there's potential. He's instinctive, at least, even if he lacks training. But he relies too much on it and brute force, and instincts alone won't close the gap between him and the Uchiha. The boy's raw strength means nothing without the skill to back it up. If he could learn to control your power, he'd shatter Uchiha's ego in seconds. But with the way he's fighting now, watching this is almost painful. Back to the fight. Still think you're going to wipe the smug look off my face? Sasuke asked, his tone icy. Naruto scrambled to his feet, his jaw tight. You just got lucky! He shouted, charging forward again. This time, he feinted left before throwing a right hook aimed at Sasuke's jaw. Sasuke tilted his head slightly, the punch grazing past his cheek. His counter was swift, a palm strike to Naruto's chest that knocked the air from his lungs. Naruto stumbled but didn't fall, his fiery determination forcing him to stay upright. Without thinking, Naruto leapt into the air, twisting his hips into a flying kick aimed at Sasuke's chest. Sasuke's dark eyes flicked upward as he shifted his weight. At the last second, he stepped aside, letting Naruto sail harmlessly past him. Naruto landed hard, his knees buckling slightly as Sasuke spun behind him and swept his legs out from under him. Naruto hit the dirt face first, gasping as laughter erupted around him. Nice one, Naruto! Kiba howled, doubling over. I can't believe he thought that would work! One of Sasuke's fangirls giggled, her voice sharp and mocking. Naruto groaned, his face burning with humiliation as he climbed to his feet. He could feel the other students' eyes on him, their sneers cutting deeper than any punch. His hands clenched into fists, dirt crumbling between his fingers as he glared at Sasuke. Give up, Naruto, Sasuke said coldly. This is pointless. Not a chance, Naruto shouted, rushing forward again. His movements grew sloppier as frustration clouded his judgment. He swung wildly, his punches erratic, his kicks poorly timed. Sasuke moved like water, slipping past each attack with practiced ease. When Naruto overcommitted to a heavy punch, Sasuke caught his wrist mid-swing. He twisted lightly, forcing Naruto off balance, and swept his feet out from under him once more. This time, Sasuke pressed his forearm against Naruto's throat, pinning him to the ground. Enough! Iruka called out, his voice sharp as he stepped forward. That's enough for today! Sasuke released Naruto and stood, brushing off his sleeves as he turned away. Try again when you're ready to take this seriously, he said, his tone indifferent. Enough! Iruka called out, his voice sharp as he stepped forward. That's enough for today! Sasuke released Naruto, stepping back and brushing imaginary dust from his sleeves. His face remained calm, almost bored, as he stood tall above his defeated opponent. Naruto lay on the ground for a moment, his chest heaving as dirt clung to his clothes and sweat dripped down his face. Get up, Naruto, Iruka said, his tone softer now. He crouched slightly, offering a hand, but Naruto shook his head and pushed himself to his feet unsteadily. His legs wobbled, but he stood tall, even if his fists still trembled at his sides. Both of you, Iruka continued, gesturing between them. Seal of reconciliation. Now. Naruto froze, his hands twitching. The weight of his humiliation bore down on him like a lead weight, and for a moment, he couldn't move. He glanced at Sasuke, who stood calmly, his expression unreadable, as though the fight had been little more than a mild inconvenience. Sasuke raised his hand, extending it forward with a practiced indifference that made Naruto's blood boil. Hurry up, loser! He muttered, his voice quiet but sharp enough to cut. Naruto clenched his teeth, his fingers digging into his palms as he stepped forward. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to walk away, to leave and nurse his pride in silence. But Iruka's gaze was steady, expectant, and the weight of the academy tradition loomed too large to ignore. He raised his hand, trembling as he formed the half-ram seal. Their fingers touched briefly, and for a fleeting moment, Naruto thought he saw something flicker in Sasuke's dark eyes, respect, or maybe acknowledgement, but it was gone before he could be sure. The union sign complete, Sasuke pulled his hand back, slipping it into his pocket as he turned on his heel. Try harder next time, he said coldly, his back already turned as he walked away. Naruto's hand fell limply to his side. He stared at Sasuke's retreating figure, his chest tightening as the sting of his defeat sank in. Around him, the other students murmured, their voices a mix of admiration for Sasuke and laughter at his expense. But Naruto didn't listen. Iruka placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Good effort today, Naruto, he said quietly, his tone full of forced optimism. There's always room to improve. Don't forget that. Naruto didn't respond. He just nodded stiffly, his eyes fixed on the ground as he turned and began walking away. With Sukuna. This is painful. What did I just watch? A sparring match or a comedy act? It's got worse by the minute. He leaned back, one of his four hands rubbing his face in exasperation. Your form is atrocious. Your balance is non-existent. And that, Sukuna gestured vaguely toward Naruto's failed high kick, though no one could see him. That wasn't even an attack. That was a self-inflicted embarrassment. Sukuna pinched the bridge of his nose, letting out a low, frustrated groan. I can't watch this anymore. This isn't sparring, it's a damn comedy show. Who taught you to fight like this? A drunk monkey? His irritation deepened as he observed Sasuke's calculated movements. The Uchiha brat is toying with you. He's not even trying, and you're making him look like a prodigy. This is pathetic. I can't believe I'm stuck in the mind of this fool. He muttered, his voice filled with exasperation. You're not just bad, you're legendarily bad. He sighed deeply, lowering his hands to glare at Naruto through his perspective. If humiliation were a weapon, you'd be unbeatable. But as it stands, this Uchiha brat just buried you in front of everyone. You're supposed to have potential, and this is what you show me? Tripping, missing, falling on your face? I've seen drunken fools fight with more grace. Then Naruto missed an aerial attack that made Sukuna actually sit up, one of his hands clenching into a fist. You jumped? Of all bucking things, why the hell would you jump again? If this was an actual fight, you'd already be 6 feet under. I swear if I had a body right now, I'd walk out of this mess myself. This is beyond embarrassing. It's so bad it's second-hand embarrassment. Outside. Naruto lay there for a moment, his chest heaving as he stared up at the sky. Slowly, he sat up, dirt clinging to his clothes and sweat dripping down his face. His hands trembled as he pushed himself to his feet, his head hanging low. As Naruto trudged back toward the group, the sound of laughter pierced his ears like sharp daggers. Each step felt heavier than the last, his body weighed down not just by the bruises from the fight, but by the sheer weight of humiliation pressing on his chest. Dirt clung to his sweat-soaked clothes, his red hair plastered messily to his forehead, and his bright blue eyes, normally filled with defiance, were now clouded with shame. The students' laughter seemed to echo endlessly in his mind, their voices hurting more than any punch Sasuke had landed. Naruto's fists clenched at his sides, and his face burned from embarrassment. He refused to look up, keeping his gaze fixed on the dirt beneath his feet as he walked towards them. When he reached the edge of the group and sat on the ground, wincing from the lingering pain of Sasuke's blows. But it was nothing compared to the hollow ache gnawing at his pride. The snickers and whispers didn't stop. He could feel the weight of their stares even though he refused to meet their eyes. What a loser! Someone muttered. He actually thought he could beat Sasuke. Everyone knows he's the dead last. He should just give up already. He shouldn't even be here. Another boy scoffed. I mean, this is the same idiot who couldn't control his chakra earlier, a girl said. Naruto heard all of this, and normally he'd just brush it off with a grin or laugh, but this time he didn't. He felt sad, humiliated, and most of all anger. It's not fair. Naruto thought to himself, they're all laughing at me, no matter how hard I try it's never enough. They don't know what it's like to be me. I try so hard and no one wants to help me. Maybe if they actually tried to help I wouldn't be so bad, but they all push me away like I'm a plague, and I don't understand why. Why me? Why does everyone hate me? Is it because of my hair? He tugged at a loose strand of red that had fallen in front of his face. Is it because of this? They'd always said it made him look weird, called him things like firehead or freak. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. He sat alone, his back turned to the others, shielding himself from their stares. The cheers and shouts from the sparring matches continued behind him, but they only reminded him of what he wasn't, of what he couldn't do. For the first time in a long while, Naruto didn't feel like standing back up. Later day. After the bell rang signaling the end of the day, the students poured out of the academy chatting and planning things, but Naruto was the last one to leave trailing behind them. He had no one to chat with, no one to plan things with, and he still felt humiliated from the sparring match, if it could be called that, from earlier. He, as always, was all alone. Naruto walked through the streets. He kept his gaze fixed on the ground, blocking out the whispers and glares of the villagers. Normally, he'd stop by a Chakra for a bowl of ramen to cheer himself up, but today he didn't feel like it. The thought of smiling or laughing felt impossible. Instead, he trudged toward the rundown part of the village where his apartment was. As he neared a corner, two familiar voices reached his ears: Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamanaka. His heart gave a small leap, and for a moment, he hesitated. Maybe he could say hi, join their conversation. A flicker of hope stirred in his chest as he stepped toward them. But then he heard his name. I mean, can you believe it? That match with Naruto and Sasuke, it was so pathetic. Sasuke wasn't even trying, and Naruto was still falling all over himself. It was hilarious, Ino said. Sakura laughed, shaking her head. I know, right? He's such a loser. There's no way someone like him could ever match Sasuke. She scoffed. Honestly, I don't know why he even tries. It's like, just give up already. Naruto's heart sank. His hand, which had started to raise in greeting, dropped limply to his side. He ducked back behind the corner, his chest tightening as their words echoed in his ears. His throat felt dry, and his fists clenched at his sides. Why did it hurt so much? A part of him told him to leave, that he should leave, but he couldn't, or rather didn't, and he would soon regret it. Right? I mean, he's always acting like he's some kind of big shot, Ino added, rolling her eyes. Like, give me a break. You're not special, Naruto. You're just embarrassing. And loud, Sakura said, crossing her arms. He never shuts up. Always yelling about being Hokage or trying to show off. It's so annoying. Oh, and don't forget the way he dresses, Ino said with a smirk. I mean, what is that? Bright orange? Does he think he's a traffic cone or something? Sakura snorted. He looks ridiculous. Honestly, it's no wonder he's still the dead last. He can't even figure out how to dress himself, let alone how to be a ninja. Ino grinned mischievously. Oh, and what about how he's always asking you out? Like, seriously, what does he think is going to happen? You'd never go out with someone like him. Ew, gross, Sakura said, her face twisting in disgust. You know I like Sasuke. Naruto's nothing like him. He's loud, annoying, and he'll never measure up. Honestly, it's pathetic how he keeps trying. Does he really think someone like me would ever say yes? Not a chance. Ino giggled. Right? Like, does he even know how out of his league you are? Sakura rolled her eyes. I don't think he knows anything. He's just ugh, everything about him is annoying. He's so clueless, and he can't even take a hint. You're way too good for him, Ino said smugly. Then she paused, her voice lowering slightly. And I mean, he's, an orphan. Sakura blinked. Yeah, I guess that's part of it. I mean, it's sad or whatever, but it's not like he's ever going to be anything special. No parents, no clan, nothing. How's someone like that ever supposed to be a ninja? Let alone Hokage? Ino nodded in agreement, her voice taking on a mockingly sympathetic tone. Poor little Naruto. All alone with no one to care about him. Maybe that's why he's always trying so hard. It's like desperate, Sakura sighed dramatically. Yeah, but it's not like trying is going to change anything. He'll never be as good as Sasuke, and he'll never be anything but an annoying, loudmouthed orphan. That's just who he is. You're way too good for him, Ino said smugly. Then she paused, her voice lowering slightly. And I mean, he's, an orphan. Sakura blinked. Yeah, I guess that's part of it. I mean, it's sad or whatever, but it's not like he's ever going to be anything special. No parents, no clan, nothing. How's someone like that ever supposed to be a ninja? Let alone Hokage? Ino nodded in agreement, her voice taking on a mockingly sympathetic tone. Poor little Naruto. All alone with no one to care about him. Maybe that's why he's always trying so hard. It's like desperate, you know? Sakura sighed dramatically. Yeah, but it's not like trying is going to change anything. He'll never be as good as Sasuke, and he'll never be anything but an annoying, loud-mouthed orphan. That's just who he is. You're way too good for him, Ino said smugly. Then she paused, a wicked grin spreading across her face. And I mean, he's an orphan. Like, no family, no legacy, nothing. What does he even have to offer? Sakura scoffed, crossing her arms. Exactly. No one cares about him. He's just a loudmouth who thinks yelling about being Hokage will make people notice him. Honestly, it's pathetic. He doesn't even have parents to teach him how to act or anything. And what's with that hair? I mean, come on. Who even has hair like that? It's like he's trying to stand out. Ino laughed, brushing her own hair over her shoulder. Right? It's so weird. All that red with those bits of gold and blonde? He looks like I don't know, a carnival act or something. No wonder people stare at him, it's not because they like him. It's so unnatural, Sakura added, shaking her head. I'd bet even his parents would have hated it, and those whisker marks. If he even remembers what they looked like, anyway. Yeah, those whisker marks, Ino said, her voice dripping with mockery. What's up with those? They make him look like some kind of freak. Sakura snorted. Right? It's like he's trying to look like a fox or a cat or something. They just make him look stupid. Ino giggled. Totally. They're so weird and creepy. I bet they're another reason people avoid him. I mean, who wants to talk to someone who looks like that? Sakura sighed, shaking her head. He probably thinks it makes him special or something, but it doesn't. It's just another thing that makes him stand out in all the wrong ways. Ino giggled again. He probably doesn't even realize how pathetic it looks. Poor little Naruto, all alone, running around with that ridiculous hair and those stupid whiskers, yelling about being Hokage. He just looks so desperate. Sakura nodded in agreement, her tone growing colder. Yeah, and it's not like that's going to change. He'll always just be Naruto. An annoying, loud orphan who thinks he can be something when he's really nothing. Ino smirked. You said it. No parents, no family, no future. And those whiskers? What's the point in even trying? Sakura shrugged, letting out a light laugh. I don't know. Maybe he thinks he'll find someone who actually cares, but let's be real, who would? He's so hopeless. Little did they know, Naruto was right there listening to them. Or maybe they didn't know and didn't give damn, he didn't know. Regardless, Naruto heard, and it felt as though he'd been stabbed in the chest, the pain sudden and sharp, making it hard to breathe. His heart sank, heavy and cold, before it felt as though someone had taken it and shattered it like fragile glass. The weight of their laughter, their mocking tones, pressed down on him, and for a moment, he couldn't move. They really think that about me? The thought spiraled in his mind, tangled with the sound of Sakura's voice. He tried to swallow, but his throat was dry. And the word, orphan, echoed in his head, each repetition sharper than the last, until it felt like a kunai being twisted in his chest. His breath hitched, and he instinctively clutched at his stomach, as if the pain were physical. But it wasn't, it was worse. It was the kind of pain that didn't leave bruises, the kind that hollowed him out from the inside. No parents, no family, no future, their words looped endlessly in his mind, stabbing deeper each time. He staggered back a step, his body trembling as though the world around him had turned freezing cold, fade below zero. It wasn't the first time someone had called him an orphan, but hearing it like this from her made it unbearable. Sakura's voice, the one he'd always hoped to hear saying something kind, something warm, was now insulting him. Naruto's knees felt weak, but he forced himself to stay upright. He clenched his fists, causing his nails to dig so deep that they drew blood. But the sting in his hands was nothing compared to the ache in his chest. It felt as though something inside him had cracked wide open, spilling out every ounce of hope he'd been holding onto. He wanted to run out and yell at them, to scream that they didn't know him, that they didn't understand, but no words came. What could he even say? The truth of their words, that he had no family, no one waiting for him at home, was a wound too deep to ignore. For all his stubbornness, All his loud declarations of becoming Hokage, this was a truth he couldn't shout away, he couldn't even dream it away at night. Instead, he took a shaky step back, then another, retreating further into the shadows as his chest heaved with shallow breaths. Why does it have to be this way? The question burned in his mind, but there was no answer. There never was. It didn't matter how hard he tried, how much he gave, people always looked at him the same way. A nuisance. A joke. A nobody. Naruto's vision blurred as tears threatened to spill, but he refused to let himself cry, not here, not where they could hear him. He swallowed hard, forcing the lump in his throat down, but the ache in his chest only grew heavier. He swallowed hard, forcing the lump in his throat down, but the ache in his chest only grew heavier. Naruto around quickly, his feet moving on their own as he went the opposite way, making sure they wouldn't see him. He didn't care where he was going anymore. He just had to get away. Away from their laughter, away from their cruel words that kept playing over and over in his head like a broken record. No family, no future. Who would even care? The words rang in his ears, louder than anything else, drowning out the sound of the world around him. He turned abruptly, his feet moving before he could think, taking him back the way he came. He couldn't let them see him like this. He kept his head down as he walked. He didn't even care where he was going anymore, as long as it was away from them. His mind raced, their voices replaying over and over. Why would they say that? How could they? Naruto bit the inside of his cheek so hard he tasted blood, hoping the sting would snap him out of the spiraling thoughts. But it didn't. Their laughter, their mockery, it was all too much. He took another turn down a side street, making sure he was far from anyone who might see him. His breath came in shaky gasps, and his chest felt like it was about to collapse under the weight of it all. No family, no future. He wanted to scream, to yell until his voice gave out, but instead, he kept moving, his legs carrying him toward the only place he could go, home. He wanted to scream, to yell until his voice gave out, but instead, he kept moving, his legs carrying him toward the only place he could go, home. The streets blurred around him as he walked, his head down and his fists shoved deep into his pockets. By the time he reached his apartment building, the sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows that stretched across the cracked pavement. Naruto stopped at the base of the exposed outdoor stairwell, looking upward to the top floor where his apartment was. The building was old, its once white paint now faded and peeling, and the old wooden stairs were probably never replaced. They each creaked under his weight as Naruto trudged up the stairs. The sound always made it feel like the steps might give out beneath him, though they never did. Still, it added to the feeling that this building, this life he lived, was barely holding together. When he reached the shared walkway outside the upper floor, he glanced around. A few doors had chipped nameplates or scuffed mats in front of them, but his was as bare as the rest of the rundown complex. He fumbled in his pockets for his keys. He checked one pocket, then the other, but they weren't there. He patted himself down once, twice, then groaned. Great. Just great. He turned to a loose brick in the wall near his door, carefully pulling it out to reveal the spare key he'd stashed there. It was dirty and slightly bent, but it was all he had. Naruto shoved the key into the rusty lock, twisting and jiggling it for about 10 minutes until it finally gave way with a loud click. He stepped inside, shutting and locking the door behind him. His apartment was as small and shabby as ever, with peeling wallpaper and a musty smell that no amount of airing out could get rid of. He dropped his bag near the entrance, kicking off his sandals without a second thought. They landed haphazardly near the wall, but he didn't care. The cracked tiles of the bathroom floor felt cool under his feet as he turned the shower knob, waiting for the water to heat up. He reached a hand under the stream and immediately jerked it back. Cold, he muttered, narrowing his eyes at the faucet. He turned the knob all the way to the left, but the icy water didn't change. Son of a hitch! That goddamn landlord cut off the gas again, he snapped, his voice echoing in the tiny bathroom. He slammed the faucet shut with more force than necessary, his jaw tightening. Cheap bastard. I pay rent, don't I? Stupid asshole. Naruto stormed out of the bathroom and into the small kitchen. He grabbed a plastic container, filled it with water, and shoved it into the microwave. Slamming the door shut, he punched the buttons and watched the timer count down. For exactly 2 seconds. Then the microwave sputtered, the lights flickered, and everything shut off. Naruto stared at it, his fists clenching. "Oh, come on!" he snapped, slamming a hand against the side of the microwave. The old thing usually came back to life after a few hits, but this time it stayed stubbornly silent. He slammed it again, harder, but it didn't make a difference. It sat there, dark and useless, like everything else in this place. "Ugh, stupid piece of junk!" Letting out a frustrated sigh, Naruto stomped back to the bathroom. "Fine. Cold it is," he muttered under his breath. He stripped out of his clothes and stepped into the shower, bracing himself as he turned the knob again. The freezing water hit his skin like icy needles, and he bit back a yelp. His muscles tensed as he forced himself to stay under the stream, every nerve screaming at him to jump back. He clenched his teeth, shivering violently as the water drenched his hair. It was freezing, but he couldn't do anything about it. Just like always. And then the shower head broke. The settings shifted with a loud click, and the stream turned into a high-pressure spray that rained down on him like hailstones. The water pelted his skin fast and hard, stinging as he struggled to adjust the settings back. His wet hands slipped on the knob, and the relentless spray continued to batter him, soaking the entire bathroom in the process. "Why won't you turn off?" Naruto growled, his voice rising with every word. Finally, after several attempts, the faucet screeched to a stop. He stood there for a moment, dripping and shivering, his breath coming in uneven bursts. His red hair clung to his face in uneven clumps, and his shoulders slumped in defeat. Naruto grabbed the nearest towel, rubbing it over his arms and face before wrapping it around his waist. He glanced at his reflection in the cracked mirror and froze. The face staring back at him didn't feel like his. His blue eyes looked dull, tired, and the vibrant streaks in his red hair only made him feel more out of place. Turning away, he muttered under his breath, "Stupid hair, stupid apartment, stupid life." He left the bathroom, drying off, then he tossed the towel onto a chair before pulling on his shorts and an old, threadbare shirt. The fabric clung to his damp skin, but he didn't care. He just needed to eat something. Naruto walked into the small kitchen, his bare feet scuffing against the cracked linoleum floor. He opened the cabinet above the counter, scanning its nearly empty shelves. A few cups of instant ramen sat haphazardly on the edge, their bright packaging mocking him with their cheerful colors. He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Who am I kidding?" he muttered under his breath. Reaching for one, he didn't even glance at the flavor before ripping off the lid. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered. He turned to the stove, setting the cup down and twisting the knob to ignite the burner. Nothing happened. No flame. No heat. Just silence. He froze for a moment, his hand still gripping the knob, before realization dawned. The gas. The damn gas. Naruto's teeth clenched, his jaw tightening as anger flared in his chest. "That damn bastard!" he spat, slamming the knob back to its original position. "A guy can't even have a nice warm cup of ramen around here! I swear I gra!" His voice echoed in the empty apartment. Desperate, he turned to the microwave, shoving the cup inside and slamming the door. He pressed hard on the buttons, his frustration boiled over when nothing happened. The display remained blank, unlit. Naruto let out a growl of rage, hitting the side of the microwave with his fist. "Of course! Why wouldn't it work?" Since that failed, he yanked the cup out, cold water sloshing onto his hand. He glared at the pathetic meal in his grasp before resigning himself to the inevitable. He poured cold water into the ramen cup, the noodles floating lifelessly as they soaked. With slow, deliberate movements, he carried the cup to the small table in the corner of the room and sat down. He held his chopsticks, his fingers trembling as he prepared to eat. But then he stopped. The words echoed in his mind. "He's an annoying orphan. No one cares about him. No family, no future. He'll always just be a loser." Naruto stared at the cup, his vision blurring as his chest tightened. His hands shook, the chopsticks wobbling between his fingers. The longer he looked, the more their laughter rang in his ears. What's the point in even trying? Something inside him snapped. The chopsticks cracked in his hand with a sharp snap, before he hurled them to the side. His hand shot out, knocking the cup of ramen off the table. It flew across the room, water and soggy noodles splattering against the wall and floor. But that wasn't enough. Naruto grabbed the edge of the table, his knuckles white as he flipped it over with a guttural roar. It crashed into something, but he didn't stop to look. His chest heaved as his eyes darted around, wild and unfocused. His fist flew forward, slamming into the nearest wall with a loud thud. He hit it again. And again. The dull ache in his knuckles grew, but he didn't care. His punches grew harder, the impact shaking the brittle wall as cracks spiderwebbed across its surface. His knuckles split, blood flowing and smearing across the plaster, but he didn't stop. Why? Thud. Why is my life like this? Thud. What did I do wrong? Thud. His voice cracked, raw and uneven, but he didn't stop. His fists pounded into the wall again and again, the dull impact reverberating through his arms. Each strike was harder than the last, matching the relentless torrent of questions hammering in his head. Why am I all alone? Why do I always suffer? His voice rose to a scream, tearing from his throat like a wounded animal. His vision blurred with tears he refused to let fall, and the dull ache in his knuckles was eclipsed by the searing storm of emotions inside him. Why do they hate me? The plaster cracked under his fists, small fragments crumbling to the floor, but he didn't care. The sting of his split skin, the blood smearing the wall, it didn't matter. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Over and over and over. And over. And over. And over. And over. And over. And over again. Just let me live already. He roared, his voice raw and cracking as his fists slammed into the wall one last time, blood dripping from his knuckles and smearing across the fractured plaster. His body trembled violently, and he heaved heavily as he staggered back, his legs giving out beneath him. Then slid down the wall slowly, leaving streaks of red behind as he crumpled to the floor. His hands hung limply at his sides, his head tilting forward as the first tear spilled down his cheek. And then another. And another. The tears came in an unstoppable wave, hot, unrelenting, and stinging as they rolled down his face. His shoulders shook uncontrollably, with silent sobs that grew louder, more ragged, with each breath. Until they filled the empty apartment, a sound of pure anguish. Blood smeared the wall where his fists had struck, red stains marking the fractured plaster. The overturned table lay on its side, ramen noodles scattered across the floor like discarded fragments of a life barely held together. Naruto sat there, hunched over, his body cradling his despair as the anger and fury drained away, leaving only a hollow emptiness behind. His tears dripped onto the floor, merging with the spilled water, as he whispered hoarsely to himself. Why can't I just be happy? The room didn't answer. It never did. 3 hours later. Naruto's sobs echoed in the silence, the sound sharp and broken, before fading into nothingness. He sat slumped against the wall, his bloodied hands resting limply at his sides, his breath shallow and uneven. But then something shifted. The air around him grew heavy, oppressive, and the room seemed to tilt slightly as though the world itself had come unhinged. Naruto's heart raced, his eyes widening as the space around him blurred and twisted. The apartment walls faded, replaced by an unnatural darkness that seemed to swallow everything whole. His gaze traveled upward, and his stomach twisted. The ceiling, or what passed for one, was made of massive bones, curved and jagged, like the ribs of a giant beast. They stretched high above him, their stark whiteness contrasting with the eerie red glow that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. The air, or whatever filled this space, pressed heavily against him, making it hard to breathe. It felt as though an invisible weight was crushing his chest, threatening to force him to his knees. What is this? Naruto found himself standing knee-deep in liquid. He couldn't tell if it was blood or water dyed red, but it rippled and sloshed with each movement he made. The thick, metallic scent that filled his nose suggested something darker. Blood? Naruto's legs trembled, but he forced himself to move, the red liquid splashing with each step. His gaze fell ahead, and his heart nearly stopped. In front of him, stacked high like a grotesque monument, were countless skulls. Their hollow eye sockets seemed to stare back at him, accusing and lifeless. Some were human, others unrecognizable, twisted into shapes that made his skin crawl. The pile rose higher and higher until it formed a jagged pedestal, and atop it sat a throne. A throne of bones. And on that throne sat something that defied reason. It looked vaguely human, but the term barely applied. Its four muscular arms rested casually on the armrests, and each one had claw-like fingers that twitched ever so slightly, and its body was muscular but grotesque and covered in black markings. So far all of that Naruto could tolerate, however it was the faces that made him freeze. Yes, faces. The figure had two faces, and both pairs of crimson eyes bore into Naruto like they could see every inch of his soul, stripping him bare with their gaze. His presence alone was suffocating, the air, if it could even be called air, pressing down on Naruto's chest like a weight he couldn't shake. The pressure in the air intensified, forcing Naruto to stiffen as every nerve in his body screamed at him to flee. His legs trembled, but he refused to kneel. His fists clenched at his sides, blood from his earlier outburst dripping into the crimson liquid below. Sukuna's grin widened, the corners of his mouth stretching unnaturally as his head tilted ever so slightly. A low, rumbling chuckle escaped him, echoing like thunder in the vast space. Well, Sukuna said, his voice deep and resonant, vibrating through the very air. You didn't kneel. Interesting. The ki radiating from him was overwhelming, like a blade pressed against Naruto's throat. It felt as if the very space around him was alive and ready to crush him. His heart beat in his chest rapidly. One might think he'd have a heart attack, but he stood his ground. Despite his earlier despair, a part of him refused to show weakness. Whoever or whatever this was, he had to face it head on. He refused to run away. Who are you? Naruto stammered, his voice trembling but defiant. He clenched his fists tighter, nails biting into his palms. The Shinigami? You're here to make my life worse or kill me, aren't you? Sukuna let out another laugh, leaning forward slightly as his crimson eyes gleamed with amusement. Shinigami? Kill you? No, boy, I'm something far worse. His grin grew impossibly wider, bearing jagged teeth that seemed to glint in the faint, blood-red light of the space. If I wanted to kill you, you'd already be dead. As for making your life worse, well, that remains to be seen. Chapter 6, Revelations. Inside of Naruto. Naruto clenched his fists as he stood before Sukuna, his heart pounding in his chest. The overwhelming pressure of Sukuna's ki that he had radiated moments ago had vanished, but the memory of it lingered. It had been a test one meant to see if Naruto would kneel. Despite his fear, he didn't. The silence between them stretched, heavy and suffocating. Sukuna sat motionless on his throne, his sharp gaze fixed on Naruto, who refused to back down. After a moment, Naruto swallowed hard and finally spoke. If you're not the Shinigami, then who are you? What are you? What do you want? And where are we? He demanded, his voice firm despite the tension in his chest. Sukuna didn't answer right away. He continued to watch Naruto, almost as though he were waiting for something or perhaps just amused. Finally, a faint grin tugged at the corners of his mouth. You ask good questions, brat, Sukuna said, his tone casual. Guess you're not as dumb as you look. That doesn't answer my questions, Naruto snapped, stepping forward. Stop playing games with me, I want answers. Sukuna leaned forward slightly, his grin widening. And what makes you think you have the right to demand anything from me? He said. You're in my territory, clueless about where you are, how you got here, or what I am. For all you know, I could kill you on a whim, or better yet, take over your body, and there's not a damn thing you could do about it. Naruto tensed as Sukuna's words hit their mark, his fingers digging into his palms hard enough to draw blood. Look at you, Sukuna continued, his tone sharp and cutting. Frail. Weak. And yet, here you are, barking orders like a scared little dog trying to sound tough. You think you can hide your fear behind anger? It's so human. Pathetic, really. He leaned back again, watching Naruto with detached interest. What makes you think I owe you anything? Naruto flinched, Sukuna's words cutting deeper than he wanted to admit. But even so, he held his ground. He clenched his fists tighter, the pain from his nails biting into his palms grounding him. You brought me here, Naruto said, his voice rising. His chest heaved, but he refused to back down. So yeah, you do owe me an explanation. You haven't even told me your name if you even have one. And if you're planning to kill me or take over my body like you said, then why haven't you? Huh? Sukuna chuckled, the sound low and dark. Why haven't I? He repeated, as though savoring the question. He tilted his head slightly, his expression calm. Because there's no fun in that. Naruto blinked. What? I like the hunt, Sukuna said, his tone almost conversational. I like to play with my prey before sinking my fangs in. To see how far I can push you before you break. To watch every shred of hope you cling to crumble in my hands. To make you feel despair so complete, so overwhelming, that you'll beg for death just to escape it. His grin widened, his tone darkening. Show you how meaningless your existence really is. Drown you in suffering, in pain, and in the sound of your own screams. Sweet music to my ears, a harmonious symphony. Naruto opened his mouth to respond, but Sukuna wasn't finished. Imagine it, your spirit reduced to dust, your body drenched in blood and guilt. Wanting to die but unable to, because I won't let you. Watching helplessly as your existence is ignored, your worth rejected, over and over again. Naruto clenched his fists tighter, blood dripping steadily into the rippling red liquid beneath him. His chest heaved with shallow, uneven breaths as Sukuna's words clawed at his mind. His legs threatened to give out, but he planted his feet, refusing to back away. You think I'll just break that easily? He shouted, his voice trembling but defiant. You're wrong. I've been through worse than this, you don't scare me. Sukuna let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. Oh really? You look like you're about to piss yourself. Or maybe you already have. Naruto's face burned. Shut up, he snapped. I'm not scared of you. You're just some creepy monster trying to act like you're all high and mighty. Sukuna spread his forearms slightly, looking amused. Oh? Is that what you think? That I'm just some creepy monster? His expression didn't change. Brat, you have no idea who you're talking to. I know enough, Naruto shot back. You're just another coward hiding behind a throne, running your mouth like you're invincible. Sukuna laughed, his grin widening. Brave words from a boy who's shaking in his boots. Tell me, does it help? Lying to yourself? Naruto's jaw tightened. I'm not lying. I'm still standing, aren't I? Sukuna exhaled, shaking his head. You really don't get it, do you? He shifted slightly, his figure seeming to grow larger than it already was. I'm not here to play into your little hero fantasy. I'm here to see what's left of your spirit when I tear it apart. Naruto's breath itched, but he forced himself to glare up at him. You're wasting your time. Am I? Sukuna's grin faded just a little. Do you know what true despair is, boy? Naruto didn't answer. It's not just pain or fear, Sukuna continued. It's knowing that no matter how hard you fight, no one will care. It's waking up every day knowing you'll never be enough. Never seen. Never heard. The harder you try, the deeper you'll sink until you're nothing but a hollow shell, begging for an end that will never come. I said shut up! Naruto shouted. He didn't want to admit it, but this thing was getting to him. Sukuna ignored him. That's the suffering I enjoy. Watching someone like you so full of hope, so desperate for recognition, be reduced to nothing. He tilted his head slightly, eyes half-lidded in boredom. You think you've suffered? Hated by your village, mocked, ignored? That's nothing. Child's play. Naruto swallowed hard, his chest felt tighter. Sukuna's voice darkened. I can make it far worse. And do you know the best part? He leaned forward slightly, his grin returning. You'll do it to yourself. Every step you take, every fight you put up, you'll destroy yourself, piece by piece, until there's nothing left to save. Every ounce of pain, every drop of blood, every scream. Sukuna continued. It'll mean nothing. Because you are nothing. Naruto gritted his teeth. I've heard enough. Sukuna smirked. Oh? Have I touched a nerve? You don't know me, Naruto growled. Sukuna let out a low hum. Don't I? His tone turned almost thoughtful. I know everything about you. You're just a lonely orphan, despised by the very people you cling to. No parents. No clan. No future. That's all you are. Naruto's breath hitched, his fists trembling harder than before. And that girl. Sukuna's grin stretched wider, voice turning sharp. What's her name? Sakura? He let the name roll off his tongue with deliberate slowness. Even she thinks you're pathetic. Naruto's stomach twisted. You heard her, didn't you? Sukuna's tone turned almost amused again. An annoying orphan. He leaned back, his expression unreadable. The one person you keep chasing doesn't even want you around. Naruto's fingers twitched. Sukuna laughed. Now that must sting. He knew what was a sore for Naruto. Naruto's legs felt weak, the weight of Sukuna's words pressing down on him like an iron hand. An annoying orphan, Sakura's voice echoed in his mind. It was like hearing her say it all over again. She doesn't care about you, Sukuna continued, his voice sinking lower. She doesn't see you as anything but a nuisance. A loud, stupid boy who embarrasses himself at every turn. Do you know what's even funnier? She didn't even hesitate to say it. No regret. No second thought. He paused, letting the words sink in before leaning forward slightly. She laughed at you, boy. There wasn't a trace of pity in her voice, just scorn. And yet you keep chasing her, thinking someday she'll see you. His grin widened. But she won't. None of them will. You'll always be nothing to them. Naruto's shoulders shook, his breathing heavy as he stared at the ground, unable to meet Sukuna's piercing gaze. His body refused to move, caught between anger and despair. And you know what's worse? Sukuna's voice dropped to a near whisper. You know I'm right. No matter how loud you scream, no matter how hard you fight, none of them will ever care. Not Sakura. Not your precious village. No one. Naruto's chest heaved, his throat tightening as tears welled in his eyes. He tried to blink them away, but they came anyway, hot and unwelcome as they trailed down his face. His hands trembled at his sides, blood smeared across his palms. I said shut up! He roared, his voice raw and breaking as he stumbled forward a step. His words felt hollow, more like a plea than a demand. You don't know anything! I'm not going to listen to you! Sukuna chuckled. You can scream all you want, boy, but you know I'm right. And no amount of yelling will change that. Naruto's tears fell freely now, his breath shaky and uneven. His legs felt like they would give out beneath him, but he forced himself to stay upright, even as Sukuna's words cut through him like a serrated blade. The weight of the monster's presence pressed down harder, suffocating, like a black void swallowing him whole. Is this it? Is this all I am? The words echoed in the hollow parts of his mind, the spaces where doubt had always lived. A lifetime of rejection, of being overlooked, of reaching out only to be met with cold indifference. It all came rushing back like a tidal wave. An annoying orphan. The words stung more than they should have. It wasn't like he hadn't heard worse. But this time, it came from someone he had believed in. Someone he had trusted. His knees wobbled. His hands shook. His chest burned. But something deep inside him began to stir, a faint ember in the darkness. I've always been alone, hated, unacknowledged. He had fought so hard to change that. To prove he wasn't just some pest, some dead last failure that everyone wrote off before he even had a chance. He had pushed forward every single day, waiting for the moment when anyone would finally see him. And yet, here he was. Alone. Again. The ember flickered. But I'm still standing. After everything, I'm still standing. The fire grew, fueled by every scar he had carried since the day he could remember. The lonely nights. The empty stares. The aching in his chest that never quite went away. His breath steadied, though the weight in his chest remained. His legs no longer trembled. His fists remained tight, nails biting into his palms, but no longer from fear this time. It was something else. Resolve. His head lifted, blue eyes still shining with tears, but beneath them burned something stronger. Something unshakable. Naruto met Sukuna's gaze. "Shut the hell up," Naruto said, his voice low but firm. Sukuna's smirk faltered slightly. Naruto stepped forward, his legs were no longer shaking. "You don't get to tell me who I am." Sukuna's grin faded further as he watched Naruto. "Yeah, maybe I am an orphan," Naruto continued, his voice growing steadier. "Maybe no one cares about me. Maybe the whole damn village does hate me. But so what? You think that makes me weak?" He pointed at Sukuna, his bloody hand trembling but determined. "You think you can break me just by throwing my pain in my face? You're wrong. I've been through hell my whole life. I've fallen and gotten back up more times than I can count. And yeah, I cry, and yeah, I get angry, but I don't stop." He took another step forward, his resolve solidifying with each word. "If you want to kill me, then go ahead. Do it right now." His arms spread wide as he stared down Sukuna. "Like you said, I've got nothing to lose. I'll probably be reborn or something anyway." Sukuna's grin returned, but this time, it wasn't mocking, it was something else. Naruto continued, his voice unwavering. "But I won't cower. I won't break. And I sure as hell won't be your plaything." His eyes locked onto Sukuna's, burning with defiance. Then, without hesitation, he lifted his hand and gave Sukuna the middle finger. "Buck you!" For a moment, the tension in the space held, thick and suffocating. Then Sukuna's gaze stayed on Naruto, and his raised middle finger. The oppressive air in the space seemed to lift slightly as Sukuna leaned back in his throne, his crimson eyes narrowing. The silence crackled with unspoken tension, both of them staring each other down like it was some kind of cosmic showdown. Then, finally, Sukuna laughed. A deep, echoing, full-bodied laugh that shook the very air around them. "Ha ha! Oh, now that is priceless!" He leaned back, gripping his throne, trying to steady himself, his laughter rolling like thunder through the endless void. "That's real good! You've got some balls, brat! Out of all the—" His words trailed off as he continued laughing. Naruto scowled. "What the hell is so funny?" His face burned even redder, and he suddenly felt like an idiot standing there with his middle finger still raised. He quickly dropped his hand, scowling. "TCH, son of a hitch!" He felt like an idiot. Here he was, dead serious, throwing everything he had at this bastard, and now he was just laughing at him. After a while, Sukuna's laughter died down, and wiped a non-existent tear from his eye as his laughter began to die down. "Not bad, brat. Not bad at all." He exhaled sharply with a shit-eating grin on his face. "All right, you passed." Naruto blinked, confused. "Wait, what? What are you?" "Did I stutter?" Sukuna cut him off, his grin never fading. "I said you passed. This was all a test." "A test?" Naruto shouted as he stepped forward. "What the hell does that even mean?" Sukuna sighed, rubbing his temple like he was dealing with a particularly slow child. "Think, boy. Put those tiny scraps of brainpower to use for once." Naruto's frown deepened as he stared at Sukuna, his mind turning painfully slowly like an old, rusty gear struggling to move. "So you mean?" His voice trailed off before his eyes widened, realization hitting him like a ton of bricks. "You were just messing with me?" "Yep." Sukuna gestured lazily with one of his forearms. "Took you long enough." "You're telling me all of that everything you said was just a game to you?" Naruto wanted to knock that shit-eating grin right off that thing's face. He felt even more embarrassed. "Of course." Sukuna shrugged, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "What's the point of testing someone if you don't push them to their limit?" He leaned back, his smirk still in place. "I wanted to see how far I could push you before you broke." He tilted his head slightly. "And for what it's worth, you lasted longer than I expected." "That's messed up. Who the hell does something like this just to mess with someone?" He pointed a finger, shouting, pointing his finger. "What the hell is wrong with this thing? Or guy?" "The fun kind," Sukuna replied, his grin widening. "But there's more to it than that. This wasn't just for my amusement, though I'll admit, That part was a nice bonus. This was about seeing how strong that resolve of yours really is. His tone dropped slightly, losing some of its playfulness. And what better time to test it than when you're at your absolute weakest? When the weight of everything is pressing down on you, threatening to crush you? That's when the truth comes out. That's when you see who someone really is. The true nature of their soul. Naruto's face twisted, his mind racing. His fists clenched again, though this time, not in fear. So you mean? Naruto's jaw tightened as he forced the words out. All that crap you said? About no one caring? About Sakura? About me being nothing, that was all just part of your stupid test? Of course, Sukuna said, shrugging. What did you think this was? Some heartfelt confession? His grin stretched wider. Boy, I don't swing that way, but even if I did, you wouldn't be my type. Naruto's eye twitched so hard, he was half convinced it was trying to awaken the Rinnegan out of sheer spite. I wanted to see how far I could push you before you broke, Sukuna continued. And I have to admit you lasted longer than I expected. Naruto felt his blood boil. You're a real bastard, you know that? You're worse than Sasuke. Sukuna's grin sharpened, his interest piqued. Oh? You want to compare me to the Uchiha boy? He chuckled. You mean the same one who humiliated you in front of everyone? The one who beat you so badly it was painful to watch? Naruto flinched. His face started heating up. Sukuna leaned forward, resting his chin on one hand, eyes practically sparkling with amusement. If humiliation were a weapon, you'd be unstoppable. Naruto's fists clenched. But as it stands, the Uchiha buried you in front of everyone. Thoroughly. I mean, damn brat, I've seen massacres with more dignity than what happened to you. Sukuna shook his head. It was like you were trying to set a record for the most pathetic performance possible. He let out a slow, mocking sigh. Honestly, you might as well have handed him a sign that said, "Please kick my ass in front of my peers," because he took that invitation very seriously. Naruto's face burned as the memories resurfaced, Sasuke standing over him, smug as hell, while the rest of the class watched. Sukuna wasn't done. That moment should be framed in history books under how to get publicly destroyed. I mean, I'm almost impressed. You managed to make an already embarrassing loss even worse. Okay. I get it. Damn it, enough, stop already. Naruto snapped. The last thing he wanted was to remember that. Sukuna raised an eyebrow. Why should I? It's not my fault you embarrassed yourself so thoroughly. Maybe if you spent less time yelling and more time fighting, you wouldn't have looked so pathetic. Okay. Fine. You made your damn point. Naruto snapped, waving a hand in frustration. Now answer my questions. Who are you? What are you? What do you want? And where the hell are we? Sukuna looked at Naruto with amusement, but for the first time since this conversation started, he finally seemed willing to answer. I am Ryaman Sukuna, King of Curses, he said. Naruto frowned, folding his arms. King of Curses? You're really full of yourself, huh? Confidence and a sense of superiority are only irritating when they are undeserved. However, I have earned my title, Sukuna replied calmly. Naruto rolled his eyes. Yeah, real humble. So, what are you, some kind of ghost? You could say that, but in reality, I am human just like you, Sukuna explained. Naruto blinked. Bullshit. Sukuna chuckled. Oh? And what exactly do you think I am? Naruto gestured at him. Let's see, 4 freaking arms, a throne made of nightmares, 2 faces, 2 mouths, and an ego so big it probably has its own gravitational pull. Yeah, you really scream human to me. Sukuna gave him an unimpressed look. And yet you call yourself a ninja while running around in bright orange, screaming your attacks before using them. Naruto frowned. Hey, that's okay, you've got a point there. Sukuna chuckled but didn't elaborate. Instead, he spread his arms slightly, gesturing at their surroundings. And this place? He continued, his tone casual. This is my innate domain. A small part of your mindscape. I suppose you could say it's tangled up with yours. Or rather, coexisting. Naruto frowned, trying to process what he just heard. Tangled up? What the hell does that mean? It means I've taken root here, boy. Call it a side effect of your unique circumstances. His answer only confused Naruto more. Enough riddles and strange talk. Ryama Sukuna, what do you mean by unique circumstances? Enough games. I want answers. Sukuna's smirk never wavered. Right, of course you do. But that's the problem, boy, you don't even know the right questions to ask. And why is that? Because the old man you call Hokage hasn't told you. Not a damn thing. Naruto froze. What are you talking about? I mean exactly what I said. There's a lot you don't know about yourself. His grin widened. And because you're so dense. I am not. Naruto snapped. Sure. Whatever helps you sleep at night. Sukuna shot back. But fine, let's say you really want the truth. Sukuna continued, his voice lowering. Are you sure about that? Once I tell you, there's no going back. Naruto narrowed his eyes. What's that supposed to mean? It means, Sukuna said, his voice growing colder. Everything you think you know about yourself, your past, your precious village, it'll never be the same. Once you hear it, boy, you'll be forever changed. The world you've built in that naive little head of yours? It'll crumble to dust. I don't care, enough games. Just tell me already. Naruto shouted at him. Very well. But don't say I didn't warn you. You have the nine-tailed demon fox within you, Sukuna said, pausing to let the weight of his words settle. And from what I've deduced, I was somehow dragged into this world and sealed alongside it, though the circumstances were different. Naruto's body tensed up, his throat feeling dry. Wait, what? He stammered, struggling to process the information. You heard me, Sukuna replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. Go ahead, ponder it for a while. Naruto stood there, his mind trying to process Sukuna's words, the nine-tailed demon fox within me? Suddenly, everything began to click. The cruel names. The hateful glares. The way the villagers ignored him like he didn't exist. Demon. Monster. Fox brat. He'd heard it all before. But he never understood why. But now, it all made sense. More memories surfaced, the way adults would pull their children away when he walked by, the whispers that followed him everywhere, the accusations he could never defend himself against. They stayed away because they were scared of me. Sukuna observed him in silence, waiting for the realization to fully settle before speaking. It's starting to make sense now, isn't it, brat? No, that can't be. Naruto's voice wavered. No, you're wrong. The Fourth Hokage defeated the Nine Tails long ago. Everyone knows that. Oh, he defeated it, huh? Is that what they told you? Brat, do you even hear yourself? If the fox was truly defeated, why does your entire village still fear you? Sukuna said, giving him a pointed look. Naruto opened his mouth, but no words came out. Sukuna continued. You really think something like the Nine Tails could just be defeated and vanish without a trace? Be serious. No, the fourth didn't destroy the beast. He sealed it. There was a pause before Sukuna spoke again, his words slow, deliberate. And guess where he put it? Naruto's stomach twisted. You're lying, he muttered, shaking his head. That's not true. Oh, it is, brat. Sukuna's voice seemed to press down on him like a weight. And deep down you know it. Naruto's breathing turned shallow. Sukuna clicked his tongue. Here, let me help jog your memory. Before Naruto could react, the eerie red liquid beneath them rippled, and the air around him shifted. Suddenly, the space blurred, and he found himself standing in the middle of a familiar scene, the academy classroom from a couple of years ago. Memory begin. The academy classroom was alive with energy, filled with the eager chatter of young students hanging on to every word of their instructor. At the front of the room, the instructor gestured to get the kids' attention, as he told them a story about the Fourth Hokage. And that's how the Fourth Hokage saved the village from the nine-tailed demon fox, he declared, his expression glowing with admiration. He fought the beast head-on and defeated it, saving countless lives. Truly a hero unlike any other. A wave of excitement rippled through the classroom. Wow! The Fourth Hokage was so strong! One kid exclaimed. He was the best, another added. I wish I could have seen him fight the Nine Tails. Off to the side, Naruto watched. Or rather, both Narutos did. The older Naruto, standing unseen in the middle of the memory, watched as his younger self sat at his desk, wide-eyed and leaning forward, drinking in every word. The awe in his expression was unmistakable. Then, hesitantly, the younger Naruto raised a hand. Wait, how did he defeat it? Did he use some special jutsu or something? The instructor's smile faltered, just slightly. The hesitation was almost impossible to detect, but Naruto caught it. Still, the man quickly covered it up, his voice remaining light. Ah, well, the Fourth Hokage was very resourceful. It was a combination of his unmatched skill and courage, Naruto. Now, moving on. But younger Naruto began, but before he could press further. Enough, Naruto. The instructor's tone turned sharp, snapping like a whip. This isn't the time for pointless questions. Younger Naruto flinched, his shoulders shrinking. The curiosity in his eyes dimmed as he slumped back into his seat. And just like that, the lesson moved on. The older Naruto stood frozen, watching the scene fade. Memory end. The memory faded, and Sukuna spoke. They didn't tell you the truth, did they? Even then, they avoided the real answer. Just fed you excuses the same way they always have. Naruto stood frozen. His mind raced, the pieces falling into place whether he wanted them to or not. The Fourth Hokage saved the village by sealing the Nine Tails. But if he didn't destroy it, then where? Sukuna interrupted his thoughts. It's starting to click, isn't it? He let the words hang for a moment before delivering the final blow. You were the answer. You were the vessel. Naruto stammered. And no, why? There must be a mistake, it doesn't make sense. Why would no one tell me? And why treat me like that? I'm human, a person. I'm not the Nine Tails, you're lying. You're just trying to. Sukuna cut him off. And what reason would I have to lie, brat? Naruto's hands clenched at his sides. I don't know. Maybe because you find it funny, he shouted, his voice cracking. Just like that sick test of yours. Maybe this is all just some twisted game to you. Sukuna's smirk returned. You're not wrong, I do enjoy watching you squirm. But the truth? The truth is far more entertaining. And it's staring you right in the face, whether you want to accept it or not. Naruto took a step back, shaking his head. No, that can't be true, it can't be. His voice faltered. For a long moment, he couldn't bring himself to say anything else. No, it's not true. It can't be true. Naruto clutched his head, trying to block out Sukuna's words. Sukuna saw that no matter what he said, the brat wouldn't believe it without proof, so he sighed before hopping off his throne. He landed with a dull thud. Still clinging to denial, are we? Fine. He stretched slightly as he walked past Naruto. Since words alone won't do, I'll show you. Naruto hesitated, glancing back at the eerie throne before reluctantly following him. The scenery around them shifted with each step. The liquid beneath their feet, once red and murky, began to shift. It turned yellow, and the air around them grew stale. The oppressive red sky above twisted, was replaced by damp, grimy stone. The walls closed in, rusted pipes lining the passage. The sound of dripping water echoed around them, each plop echoing. It was a sewer. Naruto grimaced, his nose wrinkling as he looked around. What is this? His voice was uneasy. This, Sukuna said, gesturing lazily around them, is the seal. It's connected to your mindscape, or rather, my innate domain. The two are tangled up, thanks to your unique circumstances. Naruto frowned, his expression scrunching in frustration. Huh! That doesn't make any sense. What does that even mean? Sai, let me put it in a way your simple mind can understand, Sukuna said, glancing back at him, as they walked. Hey! I'm not stupid! Naruto crossed his arms defensively. Right, and the Uchiha didn't completely humiliate you. Sukuna shot back, his tone dry. Next, you'll tell me you totally had a strategy in that fight instead of just flailing around and hoping for the best. Naruto's eye twitched. For your information, I did have a strategy. Sukuna raised an eyebrow. Oh? And what was it? Get my ass kicked so badly that my peers develop second-hand embarrassment? TCH, whatever. Just keep talking, Naruto said, looking away, trying to hide his obvious embarrassment. Anyways, innate domain and a mindscape are essentially the same thing, at least in retrospect. Retro what? Naruto interrupted. Focus, boy, Sukuna snapped. Sorry, Naruto muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. Sukuna sighed, continuing as they walked. As I was saying, a mindscape and an innate domain are, in essence, the same thing, just different names for similar concepts. A mindscape is a representation of a person's thoughts, memories, and experiences. It's a natural part of you, reflecting who you are on the inside. It's the space where your consciousness resides. Naruto tilted his head. So like my brain? Sukuna groaned. No, not like your brain. Think bigger. A mindscape is metaphysical, boy. It's a space tied to your mind and soul. Now, an innate domain, he continued, his tone shifting into a lecturing cadence, is also a mental landscape. It embodies the mind and soul of an individual, but it's something you're born with. Every living being has one as far as I'm aware. Naruto blinked, still struggling to grasp the concept. So where we were before, with all the bones and blood, that was your innate domain? Exactly, that was my domain, a place I claimed for myself. Not as a part of your soul, but as a separate entity now tangled up with yours. Sukuna confirmed, glad the brat was catching on. And this place? Naruto asked cautiously. This is the seal, Sukuna explained, gesturing to the walls and pipes. It's not a natural part of you, it was created to imprison the Nine Tails and keep its power from overwhelming you. It's connected to your mindscape because it's a part of you now. Whether you like it or not. Naruto frowned. But if everyone has a mindscape, does that mean everyone can come here? To their own domains? Not quite. Accessing a mindscape or an innate domain is no easy feat. It requires focus, training, and a strong connection to your own soul. Most people never even realize they have one, let alone learn how to access it. Sukuna responded. So how come I can? Naruto asked, his tone a mix of suspicion and curiosity. You're a special case, Sukuna answered. The seal makes you unique. It's connected to your mindscape, tying you to the Nine Tails. That connection allows you to enter this space naturally. With enough practice, you could come and go as you please without needing extensive training, but only because of the seal's influence. So this whole place is because of the Nine Tails? Naruto asked. Exactly, the seal is what keeps the fox contained. It protects you from its power, though, frankly, you've done a piss-poor job of using it to your advantage, Sukuna scolded. Naruto scowled, ignoring the jab as he processed the information. So you're saying this place, the Nine Tails, the seal, it's all connected to me? Bingo. And now, thanks to me, your little inner world has a new tenant. Aren't you lucky? Naruto ignored his smug tone, rubbing the back of his head as he thought it over. So this seal is supposedly keeping the Nine Tails in, right? Correct, Sukuna answered. The seal is a barrier. It keeps the fox contained and protects you from its power. Without it, you'd be nothing but a puppet to its rage. Or dead. Probably both. Naruto shuddered, glancing nervously at the pipes and walls around him. So we're walking through this seal right now? Exactly. This space is the barrier between you and the fox. And because the seal is tied to your mindscape, I can navigate through it freely just like you'll be able to with enough practice. Sukuna's voice grew darker. But don't get too comfortable. This seal is fragile. Break it, and the fox is free. And trust me, brat, that's the last thing you want. Naruto stopped in his tracks, staring down at the yellow liquid. So if this seal breaks, you die, Sukuna said bluntly. Or worse.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.